believe in all of you, and I am confident we can do it. Thank you very much. I have just come from Buckingham Palace, where I have accepted His Majesty the King's invitation to form a government. I know people at home are fed up with politics. I hear you, and I want to be honest with you. We have not been good enough, and we need to be better. We will be.
This man has no mandate whatsoever. He didn't stand on the 2024 general election manifesto. You cannot make the biggest change in British politics in 40 years without a mandate from the British people, and it will be only decent, right and proper to call a general election on that issue and to do it now.
Our fifth Prime Minister in 4 years. Blimey. And, well, look, we want him to succeed. But will this one be any different? Andy Burnham, the new head honcho, the speed this all happened, I know this is a well-trodden debate already, is actually breathtaking. 1 minute he was Mayor of Greater Manchester. What, a month and a bit ago he wasn't even an MP. The next he's holding keys to number 10 without the country ever really having a chance to scrutinise him in a prospective prime ministerial arena. Nothing at all. We really know very little.
I think Burnham has to walk a fine line. I think that's probably what's going on, because if he were to sweep into Downing Street and say, I'm going to change everything, I'm going to fix everything, I'm going to do things completely differently to Starmer, then people would say, hold on, mate, we need a general...
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
Wise words across the nation indeed. Good morning. It is Sunday, the 30th of August. This is Charlie Rowley sitting in for Mark Dolan here at the home of common sense on Talk. It is weekend breakfast, and we've got a packed marathon of the 4 hours for you this morning. We'll be going through all the front pages, all of the headlines you need to know on this bank holiday weekend. We've got some fantastic guest lined up also. But a lot of the pages in our newspapers today are filled to the brim with news, gossip, or politically related, I'm afraid. So if you thought you was going to have a nice bank holiday weekend just before Parliament comes back without any politics, well, you might be mistaken. But we'll keep it as lively and as fun as we possibly can over the next 4 hours. Let me know what you're up to. Are you travelling this bank holiday weekend? We'll have Simon Calder on the show later on to tell us all things travel, the chaos that usually ensues over a bank holiday weekend. Are you trying to get back? Are you trying to go somewhere? Have you just been away? Let me know what you think. 0344 499 1000. You can text the word TALK to 87222, or you can send us a message by following us on X. Just start your message with the word TALK, and we'll get all of your calls and messages out on national radio over the next 4 hours. Let's turn now to the front pages of our newspapers on this fine Sunday, the 30th of August. We've got the Sunday Times that starts off by saying that the PM pay deal for train drivers on the number 10 North Line. This is Andy Burnham agreeing a bumper pay rise to striking train drivers, some who earn a starting salary of £70,000 on two of those lines where that deal has been done. It's some of the worst performing rail lines. Let me know what you think about that. 0344 499 1000. Do train drivers deserve a bumper pay rise? The Sunday Telegraph goes with Healey. That's John Healey, the Chancellor of the Exchequer, eyes a tax grab on banks and big oil. Huge decisions for this government to make. Should taxes go up? Should the Chancellor of the Exchequer be reaching for that lever to tax big businesses and our oil companies in order to fund that big black hole, that shortfall of about £4.7 billion? Are taxes going to rise in the UK at the next budget? 0344 499 1000. Let me know. Should taxes go up? You might be happy to pay more tax. Who knows? Doubt it, but you never know. The Mail goes with Putin stooge will target UK drone factory. This is an ex-Kremlin chief chief's threat to target the UK as defence firms ramp up security. The Sunday Express, a topic that we'll be diving into a bit later on in the show, goes with the headline, "Free condoms dished out to asylum seekers." Well, just when you thought the phones, the days out, the dentist, the doctor's appointment, the hotel accommodation, if that wasn't enough for those great men that come across the channel in small boats, they now get the pleasure of free sexual health. The Star goes with even worse to come. That's 3,000 victims of deadly heat waves. They're saying killer heat waves are only going to get worse across the country. And The Sun, it goes with ITV chiefs in talk to revamp the classic show The X Factor. I didn't really even know that it disappeared, to be perfectly honest with you. I hadn't watched it for some time, but there you go. And this was described to me by executive producer Dean, who's in the hot seat today. He said it's a bit like a show that has failing ratings over many years, and they're trying to bring back, which I thought was whether that was a slight nod to me. I don't know whether they were saying my ratings at times, and they were just trying to get me back in. That is not the case, I'm assured, by executive producer Dean. Let me know what you think about those front pages and the topics we're going to be diving into now. 0344 499 1000. As I say, text the word talk to 87222. All of those topics, more than welcome your thoughts on. But there are two questions we're asking today on the back of what we've just been talking about. Should the right unite to stop a left-wing coalition? We'll be diving into all of those papers and stories, as I say, with Graham Davis, the presentation coach, in just a second, because, as I say, there's a lot of politics in town. It's the weekend before Parliament comes back, so that's kind of what you'd expect. But when there is so many stories pointing to perhaps an early general election, Kemi Badenoch has written to the Cabinet Secretary asking for accession talks, as it were. So that's basically allowing the Conservative Party to have talks with the Cabinet Office to set out their plans, because she thinks that there might be a general election on the cards. Reform are chomping at the bit, it seems to me, for one. Should the right unite to stop a left-wing coalition taking place if a general election is called? That number again, 0344 499 1000. And in relation to the story in The Telegraph about John Healey reaching for that lever to tax us even more than what we feel we might already be taxed, what are the biggest issues that Burnham needs to tackle, not just for this country, but also when he actually turns up to Parliament next week for PMQs? It'll be his first outing as the Prime Minister at that dispatch box, having avoided a leadership campaign, having avoided media scrutiny over the summer for the last 6 weeks. That will be the moment where the focus is on our new Prime Minister. 0344 499 1000, I should say. And I'm also delighted, along with all of those stories and topics we're going to be getting into, to welcome Graham Davis, the presentation coach, who joins me now for the first hour. Graham, good morning.
Good morning, Charlie. I have to tell you, I'm feeling very hungry this morning, because, you see, a couple of months ago, our new Chancellor, John Healey, said he would buy me dinner, but now he says he won't commit himself to that level of spending in the foreseeable future.
Well, I think you will not be the only one that feels hard done by John Healey. I think we might have a little trouble with your mic actually this morning. It might have fallen down, so
Maybe
we'll get that. We'll get that
swallowed it in some way.
I think we'll come back to Graham in just a second. Just as that's fixed. But what Graham was just saying there is that John Healey owes him dinner. Not for the first time, I think, a Chancellor owes someone something, I have to say. We are being taxed to their hilt. And not only that, it feels as though there are more taxes to come. As I say, that front page of the Daily Telegraph, Burnham and Healey looking as though they are going to increase taxes. That's a windfall tax. They're looking at oil companies and on banks. Banks have, to be fair, suffered huge profits over the last decade or so, I think since the financial crash. Is it better to have a windfall tax on the oil companies and on our banks as opposed to increasing national insurance contributions? Is it better to have a windfall tax than raise income tax, things that the previous government said that they weren't going to do? And that's precisely why the Labour government are in power. They said they were not going to increase these taxes. So, do we need a general election in order to break that sort of impasse, to allow Andy Burnham and John Healey, if he wants to raise taxes? They've got to have a general election. Let me know your thoughts. 0344 499 1000. I think we're now sorted with Graham's mic. We can return back to you, Graham.
I'm delighted to be back. On John Healey, of course, the Chancellor needs as much personal credibility as the Prime Minister for the stability of the country. And I believe that John Healey's credibility has been self-dented over the last 48 hours, having resigned from his role of Defence Secretary because he felt that not enough spending was being committed to the defence of our country. Now that's being pushed into the long grass. And that is inevitably going to mean that he starts off with rather reduced credibility even before he's really started the job. And I think that is, on a non-party political basis, this is bad news for everyone, because the Chancellor almost needs to be greater than just a party politician. He has to be somebody that the City of London and the world markets believe in and whose word they believe in. And John Healey has got a lot of repair work to have that status again.
I mean, John Healey as Chancellor, I think, threw everybody by surprise, because there was talks in the newspapers that it would have been Shabana Mahmood. She was touted, who's the current Home Secretary. Ed Miliband was obviously the big name that was doing the rounds. He was someone that worked with Andy Burnham when they were special advisors, but also around the cabinet table, I think, under the Blair years as well. So there was a lot of talk about, well, actually, if he does go for Ed Miliband, that'll be a huge lurch to the left. That means even more spending, even more borrowing, even higher taxes. The appointment of John Healey kind of caught everybody by surprise. Now, was that a tactic, do you think, to throw sort of newspapers and politicos like us off the scent, to then stabilise the market? So when the announcement of John Healey came through, it wasn't actually that much of a big deal. It was a surprise and an interesting one that sort of settled the markets to allow then John Healey to find his feet just as much as the Prime Minister has, and then now to start laying the groundwork for higher taxes.
When Healey resigned as Defence Secretary, it was deemed by the media to be an act of admirable high principle. But in retrospect, it's starting to look like a piece of low cunning. You see, John Healey has been a Labour Party man, a Labour Party machine man, a Labour Party politician, man and boy. He seems to have been around forever and has made a lot of friends cross-party as well. But really, he was clearly out of his depth as Defence Secretary. He didn't even know how many frigates we had, for instance, in a crucial media interview. And I think that the jump from Defence Secretary to Chancellor looks like part of a Machiavellian plot. It doesn't look like a credible piece of HR management.
No, it strikes me because I know we heard from Louise Haigh, you know, she admitted that actually her and Burnham had been plotting his return to Parliament for over a year. And I wonder, something that wasn't overly picked up upon, I don't think, because maybe I'm just a cynic now, having spent my days in politics as a former special advisor. They're now over, very much enjoying being here. But his resignation as Defence Secretary, you know, really did kickstart the downfall of Starmerism and Rachel Reeves. I want to know actually how much that might have been coordinated with Andy Burnham. Was he always part of the inner sanctum of Burnham's team, Burnham's plan right from the get-go? But the idea of resigning as Defence Secretary as a point of principle, because, you know, the funding wasn't there for his armed forces, all the while knowing that actually if he did this, it would trigger Starmer's downfall. Burnham, you take the risk, stand in Makerfield, get elected, get returned to Parliament, I'll be your Chancellor. Do you think that's a bit of a far-fetched theory in my new
I don't think you're being far-fetched at all. The resignation from Defence Secretary was the half-ton bale of straw that broke the camel's back with all the pressure that was on Starmer, with all the crises that were erupting around him. There was a very specific focus on the numbers in that resignation statement. And it beggars belief that he didn't know the numbers as he was going into the possibility of being appointed as Chancellor. I can't believe that a lurch upwards to Chancellor
was not something that was pre-planned as part of a greater plot over a long period of time.
Well, one of the questions we're asking our listeners and viewers today is what are the biggest issues that Burnham needs to tackle at PMQs? This is him now, you know, having to stand up in Parliament for the first time as the Prime Minister, be at that dispatch box, taking all kinds of questions right across the floor of the House of Commons, where he said he's not going to be using many notes. I mean, as a presentation coach, I mean, how does that fill you with confidence? You know, doesn't the Prime Minister... I mean, there's a lot going on for the Prime Minister, you know, in most days. Surely you need a few notes to refer back to.
Well, fortunately, I have indeed had the privilege of preparing people, as it were, on both sides of the coin for Prime Minister's questions. And it is probably the most challenging, high-pressure presentation scenario, not just in the world of politics, but in the world in general. And the use of that file of notes is a very specialised skill in itself, because some Prime Ministers use just about 10 pages, some have about 100 pages in that file, and there is a real skill that you have to get used to over a period of time to be able to work out where the post-it notes are and to find the information on a particular subject. And you've got to practice that. You've got to practice that hard in the days before a given PMQs. To me, this, oh, no notes thing looks like somebody who doesn't want to go through the grind of practicing, which I think will bite him in a bad way.
I absolutely agree, Graham, because I think there is the element of not wanting to be scrutinised about Andy Burnham. You know, he comes across as this sort of, you know, quite nice guy, you know, someone that you could actually probably go for a drink down the pub with. I wouldn't go as far to join him with a packet of pork scratchings, which I think is his favourite nibble at the bar. But he seems to be someone who... The idea of saying, right, I'm not going to have any notes, that means kind of, well, if I say something wrong then in Parliament, you know, you can't actually sort of have me for contempt of Parliament. You can't ask me for to resign because I've misled the House of Commons in some way, because I'm trying to be more, in touch with the people. I want to connect with ordinary voters and ordinary workers every day. I don't want to be that stuffy Prime Minister, who has that sort of prime ministerial approach, which is, as you say, going through notes, having that big red folder that they tend to sort of bring, and having to say everything very carefully, very choreographed, you know, in order to ensure that they're not brought before the House of Commons again to say, aha, you said this, or you used this word, or actually you've misled Parliament in some way, Prime Minister, you must resign. I think he feels as though he's just dismissing that process because he just sort of doesn't want to go through it.
Well, let's contrast him and his immediate predecessor. You mentioned process. Well, Keir Starmer was the king, no, the emperor of process. But interestingly, despite being a hugely experienced criminal barrister, probably on top of his brief on all topics at all times, he chose not to actually actively engage at PMQs. He would never answer a question head-on, but would always pivot to an attack on the person who'd asked the question, Kemi Badenoch, which inevitably caused an awful lot of criticism, even from his own benchers, and I believe was a big factor in his popularity dipping on all sides. Now, Andy Burnham's approach inevitably will be different, more genial, more human, more affable, perhaps. And if I were advising him, I would suggest that he does try something radical, and maybe he's flagging this up by saying, I'm not going to use notes. When Badenoch comes out with her first question, which inevitably will be something like, lots of teeth and claw and flashing blades, I would suggest that Andy Burnham gets up, takes a deep breath and smiles to everyone and says, look, I appreciate that the Right Honourable Lady wants to attack on all sorts of issues, and attacking does seem to be what she likes doing. But I'm not going to play the game of personal attacks from me. I'm going to do my best to engage with genuine questions during PMQs, and I would ask the Right Honourable Lady to do the same thing. it's time politics moved on from the playground of personal insults. Now, I think that would be very bold. He might try that, but I'm not sure he's got the cojones to do so.
There's a line, I think, in Tony Blair's autobiography, A Journey, where he says, actually preparing for PMQs, and I raised Tony Blair because, you know, Andy Burnham does seem to be well, he's the Labour Prime Minister, but the only Labour Prime Minister able to communicate as effectively, it seems to me, as Tony Blair was able to do. But he was very clear in his own mind that when the Tory party came for him, you know, whenever someone was asking the most difficult question or to say how terrible his Labour government was doing, he just sort of, as you say, smiled, took a step back, took a bit of a breath and just said, you know, well, thank you very much. You know, he killed them with kindness and was over-complimentary and said, I really understand. But, you know, it's a sort of when they go low, we go high, you know, and I feel that could be sort of the same approach, because Kemi Badenoch, yes, as you say, she's had Keir Starmer to deal with for you know, the last couple of years. Andy Burnham is a very different kettle of fish, and Reform too. You know, Nigel Farage is going to have to work out how to effectively play Andy Burnham and hold him to account in the House of Commons.
Well, looking at history, of course, you mentioned Tony Blair, the professional political presenter par excellence. That affability, the stepping back and the smiling and disarming, it was practiced. It was rehearsed. He did have a team, and certainly David Cameron's affability was on the basis of rehearsal as well. Going slightly more forward in time with other prime ministers that I've worked with, the affability or the geniality has to be rehearsed furiously. I mean, we would have in the main conference, in the cabinet room in Downing Street, a team of a dozen people. Some of them pretending to be MPs, one person at the end pretending to be the Speaker, various people being questioners from the other party, and we would go through all sorts of different scenarios, especially the scenario of the worst possible question that you absolutely dreaded, that you hope would not be asked. And it's the rehearsal in private beforehand that gives you the chance to relax on the actual day.
One of the questions we're asking, as I say, is what are the biggest issues that Burnham needs to tackle at PMQs? So what is, I suppose, A, the biggest issue that he needs to tackle, but also what is then the worst question that you think he could face returning to Parliament on Tuesday?
Well, already he has done more U-turns than a drunken rally driver. We are asked the question, well, would you like to meet the new boss?
That was my Uber driver this morning, actually, if you don't mind me saying.
Would you like to meet the new boss? It's the same as the old boss. I think the Labour Party are going through this agonising process of they've somehow upgraded their weekly shop from Aldi to Lidl. And really, he says that he's going to be shaking up things more than anything else that's happened over the last 40 years. Well, he seems to already be kicking the biggest issue down the road, which is welfare reform. And he really, if he's ever going to deal with that, he needs to deal with that immediately while he's on a wave, while he's on an up, rather than letting it fester for 6 months. And that, I believe, is the big issue that could either define his success or bring him down.
And because there's a lot of talk, as I say, in the papers today about an early general election, Kemi Badenoch has written to the Cabinet Secretary to have sort of access talks because she thinks that there's going to be one coming. So the Civil Service need to know the Tory party plans if they're going to win the general election. I mean, you said that Burnham is sort of on that, riding that wave of, you know, he's got a bit of a Burnham bounce, it seems. You know, he's leading some of the polls where Reform have led in the last about 300 of them, I think. Do you think he'll call an early general election? Should he call an early general election?
I believe this weekend marks the official end of the Burnhamania season because he did rather a rampantly robust speech in Kyiv for 8 minutes where he said the right muscular things, committing us to the fight for freedom against Russia on behalf of Ukraine. But all the cred he got as a potential international statesman from that, I'm afraid, was blown away by Healy letting it slip that, oh, this is just going to be a continuity budget that we'll have in a few months' time, and there'll be no commitment to 3% of GDP in defence spending. So he has to find a way of being somebody who is grasping the nettle and making it a whole new kettle of ball games. He hasn't done that so far, And also, yes, there has been a sort of Burnham bounce, and occasionally there has been an opinion poll. They might be 2 or 3 points ahead of Reform, but that is nip and tuck between them. He needs to have a sequence of polls over several weeks where there is clear red water between him and Reform, because otherwise, if he calls an election, he's guaranteed to lose dozens, if not hundreds of MPs. He will actually blow away his own majority, might indeed actually blow away his own government. So in my view, he's better off keeping definitely 2.5 years with 411 MPs rather than taking the risk of general election and suddenly it all dissolving.
I agree, as it happens. But I know there's a lot of talk out there that people think there is an early general election coming, but I think that would be the most sensible approach. Andy Burnham there, a man who doesn't have notes. And neither do we on this show, as you can probably tell.
After a general election, he wouldn't have any notes, he wouldn't have any majority.
Exactly. Graham, stay with us. That's his view so far. That was the question that we're asking, one of the 2 questions we're asking. What are the biggest issues Burnham needs to tackle at PMQs? Let me know your thoughts on that. 0344 499 1000. After the break, we'll be asking our second question. Should the right unite to stop a left-wing coalition if a general election is on the cards? The only way, it seems at the minute, for a coalition to be stopped, a left-wing coalition, the only way in which people will be able to beat Andy Burnham is it if the right unite. 0344 499 1000 or text the word talk to 87222. This is Charlie Rowley sitting in for Mark Dolan on Weekend Breakfast. This is Talk.
Scariest moment, not that I want to admit it, but where was it? Was it in the middle of the night when somebody was by your tent? What was it that you thought, my God, I'm in trouble here?
To be honest, it was the moment where I'd been stopped. I'm running down to the beach, I'm trying to get to the water. You're so tired, and I get down to the bottom of the dunes. Next thing you know, bang, 6 coppers stop me and this other lad, and I'm thinking, surely not. Surely not. They never stop any of the migrants. How all of a sudden have I run down to the beach and the 6 coppers there?
across the UK. On DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
A very good morning to you. Welcome back to Talk Breakfast with me, Charlie Rowley, in for Mark Dolan. Your calls and messages are coming in thick and fast on this fine Sunday, the 30th of August. Christine says they all need to stop acting like kids and work for the people, not themselves. That's talking about politicians. I couldn't agree more. Morning, Charlie. Glad you were coping without Jeremy. That's Jeremy Carl, who presents here Talk Breakfast Monday to Thursday, who's enjoying a nice and well-earned holiday, I think, or weekend in Spain at least, but he'll be back next week. And I'll be here on Wednesday with him, 6 till 7. Oh, yes. Have you heard they want to bring back Starmer? Says Christine also. Can't stand Blair. I think that's a bit of a joke. I don't think they will be bringing back Keir Starmer, but, you know, stranger things may have happened. Talk. Good morning, Charlie. It's too early for the right to unite. When it comes to the crunch, though, they will. Now, that's Amanda's view. That's our second question we're asking this morning. Should the right unite to stop a left-wing coalition? Graham Davis, the presentation coach, joins me still in the studio. What do you make of this? You know, do you think that at some stage the right, and that's, I would predominantly say Reform and the Conservative Party, I'll put Restore to one side for a second, although it is the case that in some polls and in some by-elections that we're seeing, particularly at a local election, the presence of Restore is taking some of Reform's vote away from it, and that is letting in other parties through the back door. And there was a particular case in the week where a Green Party candidate gained a seat from the Conservatives because there was this splitting of the vote between Conservatives, Reform and Restore. Should the right unite to stop a left-wing coalition?
There will never be a right-wing uniparty artificially created by hammering those three entities together. One of the main reasons is the personalities of the leaders. In an article today, Dan Hannan admits that he says, bad blood between the leaders of the parties. Well, between Lowe, Farage and Badenoch, there isn't bad blood. There is sulfuric acid with a hint of napalm. They can't possibly work together with each other. Admittedly, the right of centre parties, or specifically the Conservative Party as being the one that was there first and has been operating the longest period of time over the last 130 years, has had a rather easy time with the left of centre parties all essentially having to fish from the same pond. But they've done that rather effectively. The left of centre parties have competed with each other effectively. You can't expect any of the right-wing parties to put their rods away and not fish their ponds. The solution, for instance, for the Conservative Party, and I believe for Reform as well, they need to compete properly. Rather than attacking each other, they need to compete on positive policies. Nigel Farage is a weapons-grade whiner and complainer, but he hasn't been great on constructing a specific vision and a raft of policies to actually make that vision come true. Badenoch is even worse at that. She hasn't defined exactly where the Conservative Party is going or what it stands for. She has said, and the party has said, what it's not going to do. It's not going to have stamp duty. It's not going to be in the ECHR. It's not going to be a slave to net zero. But she hasn't created a raft of proactive, positive policies. And that policy paralysis means that the chemi bounce doesn't exist. It's a chemi ceiling. And with that paralysis, the Tories will never get more than 20 to 21%.
Well, they're currently, you're absolutely right, hovering around the 20 to 22% mark, depending which poll you listen to and how they're conducted. But in the absence of those policies then by the Conservative Party, she's been able to sort of stabilise the party. The party is still in existence. And indeed, Reform are only about a point or two, depending, again, what polls you listen to, ahead. So would it be the case, do you think, with the introduction of policies by the Conservative Party, if they come out with, you know, as they did at their last conference, we're getting into the party conference season now. You know, last year the Tory Party, I think, announced that they would, you know, abolish stamp duty, I think, or certainly for first-time buyers.
Yeah, and since then, nothing.
Nothing. But with more policies coming forward, will that make her and the party even more popular? Will they increase their standing in the polls?
Well, I can look you in the eye and say with definite professional certainty, without any hesitation whatsoever, that I don't know.
Okay.
But it is something that has to be tried. At the moment, we have a situation where she has allowed Reform to occupy the right-hand side of the football pitch. They have always been the ones to announce policies in a particular area first. Admittedly, some of them have been a bit wacky, completely uncosted and completely impractical, but leaving her and her colleagues to say, oh, yeah, we would have done that as well, sort of shouting, me too, me too. The opposition, the leader of the opposition needs to oppose by creating alternative policies rather than playing catch-up with Nigel Farage.
I mean, there is an element of, you know, don't make the perfect the enemy of the good. So even though, you know, the Tory party, it's its own entity, you know, Reform is its own brand, as you say, you know, that you've got to, I think that competition could be healthy because they are two separate organisations. But by and large, there's much more in common with the Conservative Party and the Reform Party than I think that they would want to admit, even if at the head of those parties, the leaders might not be getting on a personal level. You never know. It might all be slightly performative. But, you know, both want to cut welfare to fund defence. Both want to get crime down and sort of, you know, get a grip on the criminality that we're seeing on our streets. You know, both want to see growth in the economy. They want to cut taxes and regulation rather than more borrowing, more taxes, more spending and all the rest of it. So there's more in common, I think, with those parties, the Conservative Party and the Reform Party on the right, than what they might want to agree. But you're right, I don't think there will be, for what it's worth, and some sort of agreement before the election, because I think that will alienate a lot of voters. And in fact, I think that does worse for Reform, because there'll be a lot of people that they can attract from maybe the Labour Party than what the Tory Party would have been able to do on their own. So that might be detrimental to Reform.
Well, I think it could be detrimental to all the parties, because Reform voters have... A lot of Reform voters, I'm making a sweeping statement here, a lot of Reform voters are still in that mindset of 14 years of betrayal, I'm never going to vote for the Tories again. And so if a Reform candidate stands down in a given seat and there's just a Conservative candidate, Reform voters may not go to the Tories. They may go to another party to stop the Tories getting in. And I happen to know that an awful lot of Conservative Party members who really just dislike Nigel Farage for all sorts of reasons, and they don't like the overall tone of Reform. So I can't see any pre-election pact between those two actually working. Now, that doesn't stop some jockeying after the general election.
I mean, what do you make of Dan Hannan? You're right, he's got this piece in the Mail today who says, on paper, an agreement, even if unofficial, not to contest unwinnable seats. I'd go as far to say, actually, even if you don't... I think you should contest the seats, but let's say you don't campaign very hard in them. So you've got a candidate up there, but you don't really compete in it. So you contest the seat, but you don't compete. But he says, on paper, an agreement, even if unofficial, not to contest unwinnable seats would make a huge difference. Reform and the Tories have a complementary electoral geography, so the former in northern England, so that's Reform in the north of England, the industrial Midlands, Wales, which was the old Red Wall, and the latter, he says, that's the Conservative Party, in the southern shires and suburbs. So he's saying, look, Reform will do better in the north and the Midlands. They shouldn't have their impetus thwarted by Conservative candidates taking votes away, splitting the vote that would let in Labour MPs or even Green MPs or Lib Dem MPs. You never know. So is there... Do you see merit in that? That actually, look, if Reform says, right, OK, we can't really compete in, necessarily the Hertfordshires, the Cambridges or whatever, so, right, we'll put up candidates, but we won't compete because we want all of our focus to be on the seats that we can actually win in the North and the Midlands, and the Tories do the same, vice versa.
The moment that the Conservative Party agrees not to run in a dozen seats, 50 seats, 100 seats, 150 seats, is the beginning of the end of the Conservative Party. The Conservative Party feels, I believe quite rightly, that sort of constitutionally it has a duty to be a national party. And in every constituency, with the exception, of course, of the peculiarities of Northern Ireland, in every other constituency, I believe that it believes that it should always have a Conservative candidate. Even if that Conservative candidate doesn't do very well at all, it sort of has a duty.
Not in Clacton, though. Not in Clacton.
No, indeed so. But of course, obviously, the Clacton clownery was a very different situation. But in a general election, they try to put in a candidate everywhere, and they've nearly always succeeded because they believe that anybody who wants to vote Conservative should be given the opportunity to do so. And that's what I believe as well.
Let me know what you think about all of those topics. Should the right unite to stop a left-wing coalition? 0344 499 1000. We'll be going to a break now, but the Sunday Express runs with a front page that free condoms are dished out to asylum seekers. We'll be talking about that story and more after the break. This is Charlie Rowley sitting in for Mark Dolan on the Weekend Breakfast. This is Talk.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
Great.
Oh, sorry, that was just me talking to Graham there, off camera, agreeing with most of everything that he's been saying so far. 0344 499 1000, let me know what you think on that. Now, two questions that we're asking today. Should the right unite to stop a left-wing coalition? And what are the biggest issues Burnham needs to tackle at PMQs? One of the biggest issues, I think, that he needs to be tackling, full stop, is the migration crisis that we have in our country. Illegal migrants coming over, still in their not-so-small boats, it has to be said, that are offered all kinds of benefits at the expense of hard-working Brits, alarm clock Brits, a lot of you tuning in to Talk every day and sending in your messages and your views. Another benefit that it seems that these migrants get, according to the Express, and the front page of the newspaper says free condoms are dished out to asylum seekers. The policy's been branded inappropriate and a ludicrous waste of money. Graham, your thoughts?
This is a sort of news that we would have prayed for in our first year at university. Free accommodation, grants, fees paid, and free contraception as well. I'm afraid this epitomises the fact that we are the premier destination for economic migrants. We are the land of milk and honey and benefits and condoms, apparently. It's become comical. And really, I just can't see anybody looking at this and saying, yes, this is a serious policy. This will help to solve the immigration problem.
I mean, I have to always try and be fair and balanced in this seat, but I think, that doesn't mean you have to be overly generous when I think there's clearly something so fundamentally wrong in our country. And I find it so... I mean, it's been astonishing over the last few weeks, so over the summer, where we've had a number of people, particularly on the left and people who support the government, defending, for example, that leaflet that was put out. So a leaflet that is being given to migrants on their way in to say, effectively, don't rape, don't attack children, and don't beat women. as if they needed that, as if we need, people should be told that anyway, but it might be clearly a very different cultural thing, in different countries, I mean, that's up to them. But this adds to that, doesn't it? This is about saying, look, it's kind of, from my view, it's an admission that actually we've got people now that we know are coming into our country that are of a different culture, that are committing a disproportionate amount of crimes, sexual and violent crimes, compared to the numbers of people that are here, of their population size, and from their country. And now we've got to not only issue a pamphlet to them, we should be providing them with condoms, because we know, they're more sexually predatorial than anyone else. I mean, it all adds to this idea that we're letting people into the country that we just shouldn't be allowing in, but yet people on the left are sort of defending it left, right and centre, saying, no, they should be given condoms, why not, it will help.
It's interesting you say about the people on the left, because, in fact, to me, there has been a deafening silence from a lot of the left about the immigration issue. They are going with dead hand momentum rather than having an active viewpoint on it. Because I don't think I've actually heard anybody from any part of the political spectrum, either in a speech or a TV interview, coming out with words to the effect of, the immigration situation is just fine. I like the system the way it is. Small boats coming in, well, that's fine, we can manage that. We need to welcome as many people as possible, because our country has got lots of room and we've got lots of money to finance it. The status quo should remain exactly as it is. Now, I don't think I've heard anybody say that. There is, at last, a certain amount of, I think, cross-party momentum. I believe that there is a lurking majority within the ranks of Labour MPs that now, at last, feel that they need to do something about it, because there's certainly a large body of Labour voter opinion that would certainly like to do something about it.
Absolutely, and there was some pushback again over the summer where the Prime Minister said, actually, we've got to distribute migrants, right? They've got to go right across the country, including middle-class areas. Well, that prompted Rachel Maskell, MP for York, a place that I know quite well, that's why I know a little bit about this one. She sort of said, well, hang on, no. She's been advocating for, yes, more migrants to come in or to be looked after and redistributed and properly looked after, but just not in my backyard now.
Not in my front yard, not in my garden, nothing at all. That's the key test. They really would like the problem to disappear in some way, but this is the big question for the Labour left. How would they like to change the status quo?
And it's a huge question for Andy Burnham. It's one of the questions we're asking, what are the biggest issues Burnham needs to tackle at PMQs? Having had a summer of dealing with the sort of the low-hanging fruit, so you're sort of saying, right, I'm going to be the Prime Minister to send out an alert message to say, don't buy a disposable barbecue, don't use one during the height of a heat wave when we're seeing wildfires and all the rest of it. OK, I don't think we need the Prime Minister to tell us that, but there you go. He also got involved in telling us how we should be unsubscribing, or how to unsubscribe from subscriptions, because that's too... this is the Prime Minister of the day. He shouldn't be getting involved in those small, really sort of low-hanging fruit issues. I know what he's trying to do to flood the space to be seen to be looking busy. Is that sort of the person in the office that always sort of runs around looking busy but doesn't actually do anything. This is a big issue. You talked about welfare being the biggest issue that he's got to face at the dispatch box. That plays into the migration problem, doesn't it? Because there are far too many people coming across into our country illegally that just are able to get the benefits. I mean, this has to be stopped, doesn't it?
Those superficial issues that you mentioned come across like the set list for an edition of Watchdog from 1992, all the cuddly superficial things that can be fixed straight away. He's good at cuddly and superficial, but the immigration problem isn't going to be solved by him making the trams or the buses run on time. His problem is this. It's the DNA he's acquired over the last 8 or 9 years. He's not in the mode so far of being a Prime Minister, making the tough decisions about the really tough stuff. I think essentially he's stuck in wanting to skate across the pond in a superficial way because he's trying to be the Mayor of England.
I mean, he's also quite lucky, you might argue. I mean, he got rid of, well, the Labour Party effectively got rid of Keir Starmer, but, I don't think he was unhelpful in that cause. I think he rather supported that. But he's inherited Keir Starmer's attempts which now appear to be rather successful in dealing with the small boats issue. You don't just turn up as Prime Minister and wave a magic wand and then all of a sudden be able to present these stats and statistics by saying, well, hold on, the number of deportations is up, the number of people crossing the small channel is down. That's a success of Keir Starmer and Rachel Reeves. Never thought I'd be sitting here saying that, but it appears, if that is true, that is something that he's inherited from the man that he's just got rid of.
The numbers show that the problem seems to be not exactly solving itself, but getting not quite as bad as it was. But there are still lots of tweaks that Burnham could do on the side of legal immigration in relation to the rules that would reduce immigration even further. And I'm also sure that there are a lot more tweaks that could be done with firm, robust, maybe aggressive diplomacy with the French authorities. And he has to think about this from a selfish point of view, because he wants to be the best and best placed candidate to be Prime Minister after the next general election. If he can somehow not exactly solve the immigration issue, but make it an issue that isn't burning at the front of everyone's eyeballs, he will significantly dampen the reform flame and give him a chance to create that red water of 5 or 6% ahead in a succession of opinion polls against reform.
Well, and if he's able to do that, you know, you'd bet your bottom dollar that there'd be a general election. Maybe if you can do that before 2029, we could be on for an early general election. And that's why Kemi Badenoch thinks that there's one potentially coming. That's why she wants talks with the civil service. Nigel Farage is ramping up the rhetoric of having an early general election. His conference coming up as all geared around the first 100 days of what a reform government would look like. So both those parties on the right, the Conservatives and the Reform, think that there's an early general election. Let me know what you think. 0344 499 1000. Should there be one? Will there be one? Should the right unite to stop a left-wing coalition if there is one? If Burnham does get that poll bounce, or maintains the lead in the polls, if things do seem to get better, will he call one? Will he still be the Prime Minister in a couple of years' time, if that's the case? Or will it be a left-wing coalition? Should we stop it? On the right, I say we, if you're a Conservative or Reform voter. 0344 499 1000. Text the word talk to 87222. More from Graham after this break.
Scariest moment, not that I want to admit it, but where was it? Was it in the middle of the night when somebody was by your tent? What was it that you thought, my God, I'm in trouble here?
To be honest, it was the moment where I'd been stopped. You know, I'm running down to the beach. I'm trying to get to the water. You know, you're so tired, and I get down to the bottom of the dunes. Next thing you know, bang. 6 coppers stopped me and this other lad, and I'm thinking, surely not. You know, surely not. They'd never stop any of the migrants. How all of a sudden have I run down to the beach and the 6 coppers there?
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
Good morning, Charlie. We in Reform have much more that unites us with restore than divides us. We must overcome our differences. The Tories are toast. That's from John in Sutton. He's replying to the question that we're asking people this morning. Should the right unite to stop a left-wing coalition? If there is an early general election on the cards where the drumbeats seem to be louder and louder by the day, if Burnham can maintain his position in the polls, if, as Graham Davis, who's still with me, was saying earlier on, if he can maintain that position, if he can extend it perhaps, if he can get a succession of good poll ratings and also dealing with the crisis that we're facing in our country, then who knows, an early general election could be on the cards in order to stop another Labour government, I should say, or a left-wing coalition, should the right unite to thwart it in its tracks. Charlie, did you ever thought we'd reach a point whereby Starmer looked more prime ministerial than Burnham? Seeing him playing the guitar in Ukraine was a new low. That's from Neil. I'm not too sure about that. I actually quite like the guitar playing, you know, because it's a nice thing to do with troops that you want to motivate.
Are you tone deaf, Charlie?
But yes, you can know. You know that my I'm more of a karaoke person, I suppose, rather than anything else. But I thought the guitar playing was okay as a nice sort of thing.
Did you see the face of the soldier that was playing with him?
Well, I think yes, he had headphones on. I think he was listening to something else.
I think he was
trying to block it out. But I absolutely agree with that message about turning up in Ukraine just in a t-shirt. I don't care what people say about the train journey and how long it might be. This is all PR, isn't it? You know, you turn up into a country, the first foreign country you're visiting as the Prime Minister, a war-torn country, a country that we're about to give substantial amount of more help to, and rightly so. You put on a shirt and tie.
He came across like he was doing a video for Man at CNA as he came off the train. Now, I've been on that train, and for professional reasons, I've travelled to Kyiv, and it is the sort of train where you're not going to be wearing a three-piece suit and a top hat for 13 hours. The carriages are like British Rail from 1972. In the winter, they're about 100 degrees because of the heating. In the summer, they're probably about 100 degrees because of the lack of air conditioning. You are going to travel casually. But you've got a couple of minutes when the train stopped to at least put on a reasonable shirt and a jacket. It didn't have to be a full suit. I do believe it was a mark of disrespect to all those officials, relatively minor officials, unknown ones to us, who all wear suits to welcome him.
Well, he had a couple of minutes to get changed. Someone that's got a couple of years to work out whether they're going to be the next Mayor of London or not, if they get the nomination, is James Cleverly. See what I did there? Great segue.
Brilliant segue.
At this hour. James Cleverly, former Cabinet Minister, former Defence Secretary, former Foreign Secretary, was up until yesterday the Shadow Housing Secretary under Cammy Badenoch's team. He's decided that he doesn't want to be part of her team anymore because he wants to become the next Mayor of London. He wants to be the Tory candidate for Mayor of London. Your thoughts, Graham Davis?
Well, James Cleverly is, and I quote, a credible big hitter, according to James Cleverly. It's remarkable that he's already resigning from his post in the Shadow Cabinet because, in fact, he's not a shoo-in to be the candidate. The Tory selection process for the mayoral candidacy is a long and tortuous one. There will be several other contenders. He does have a lot of strengths in terms of name recognition, but he's very much something of the past. He had 4 cabinet positions. Arguably, sadly, he would play into the negativity of 14 years of failure. He epitomises the failures of the recent Tory past. I think that a Cleverly candidacy would still be likely to lose to any Labour candidate by at least 10 points.
I mean, it would be remiss of me not to ask you, given that you're a presentation coach, about those candidates. So let's say, for example, that James Cleverly did win the Tory vote from local associations. He became the candidate for the Tories. We've already got Layla Cunningham, who is the candidate for Reform. She's been there, I think, for over a year now, and as the candidate. Sadiq Khan, we're hearing he's weighing up whether to run for a historic 4th term. We don't quite know what his plans are, even though he's now been elevated to the House of Lords. People might think, well, that's one too many jobs. You're in the Lords and want to be Mayor of London. Might be a bit far-fetched. But let's say they are the 3 candidates. How do they, in your mind, appeal to the voter in London?
Sadiq Khan has made himself Mr. London. I'm not a Labour voter. I'm certainly not a Sadiq Khan fan. But he has become part of the landscape, part of the woodwork. And he is head and shoulders above any potential Labour candidate that might replace him. I assume that Layla Cunningham has a platinum membership card with the AA with all the car crash interviews she's done over the last several months. I'm afraid her credibility as a candidate seems to dip every time she opens her mouth. And also, in an interesting micro point about reform in London, in the last 10 council by-elections since May the 7th, the reform vote has gone down each time. I don't think London is going to be a reform city in the near future. It is very much a Labour city, irrespective of the strength of a Conservative candidate.
Well, that's the views of Graham Davis, presentation coach here at Talk this morning. Thank you so much for joining me. That was a good canter through some of the front pages and all those political issues. I wish we could have longer. Let me know what you think on everything we've been talking about so far this morning. This is Talk.
Californian cash machine is out.
The ATM, the American ATM.
The American ATM has run out of dollar bills. And I think it's we really need to look at why they have done it and why now, because in my mind is very hasty.
This is breaking news. Meghan Markle is in talks, apparently, to return to acting with a role in Guy Ritchie's Netflix series, The Gentleman. That would be pretty embarrassing for her, wouldn't it? Pretty humiliating.
I think it's undignified if you marry into the royal family. If you're in entertainment or something like that, actually, I think it's a very undignified thing, and I don't think that you should do it.
I think it's about money, and I think it's about position. I don't think so. I think it's sad that they're using, in a way, the children in this respect, because if these kids are, if this is not permanent, you shouldn't be moving kids out of schools at 5 and 7. You've got to act a bit more responsibly than that. So it looks like if they are enrolling them in the schools, it can't have happened on Sunday. It can't have been, these things, you can be Mick Jagger. You can't just ring up a school and say, I want to take my kids are joining you on such and such a date. There are procedures to enroll.
I think the kids are the answer to the whole thing. You're absolutely right, Julia. They're looking at the future. They're, as someone rather savagely described them, they're now middle-aged and not very interesting anymore. So
God, if they're middle-aged, what the hell are how the hell are we still surviving?
Does anybody actually care? Does anybody... Am I the only person... I do not care about Meghan and Harry. I do not care at all. Not a gnat's backside, do I? Not at all. I don't care about Meghan and... I do not care about Meghan and Harry. If they walked in this room, I'd say, get out! I don't care about Meghan and Harry. Can I put that any more emphatically? I do not care. I love Angela Levin, but I don't care about Meghan and Harry, all right? It doesn't keep me awake at night. I don't wake up in the morning going, I wonder what Megs is up to. Never, ever does it cross my mind. I don't give a hoot about Meghan.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
A very good morning to you on this Sunday, the 30th of August, here at Talk TV. It is Charlie Rowley sitting in for Mark Dolan on this bank holiday special. We've been asking two clear questions this morning. Should the right unite to stop a left-wing coalition? This is on the back of a number of stories in our national newspapers today that suggest a general election could be on the cards, and it could be coming earlier than anyone anticipated. 0344 499 1000. Should the right unite to stop a left-wing coalition? Text the word TALK to 87222 and we'll get all your thoughts and views out over the next 3 hours, because I'm here with you all the way through to 10 o'clock. The second question we're asking today, what are the biggest issues Burnham needs to tackle at PMQs? Parliament is returning next week. Andy Burnham will be at the dispatch box for the very first time as Prime Minister of the United Kingdom. He was able to avoid a leadership election. He was able to avoid media scrutiny and parliamentary scrutiny over the last 6 weeks. He seems to have had free rein. He is now going to be facing Kemi Badenoch, Nigel Farage, Ed Davey and others in the House of Commons for the very first time as Prime Minister next week. So what are the biggest issues that Andy Burnham needs to tackle when he faces the House of Commons for the very first time as Prime Minister with no notes, apparently? He's not having any notes. Much like this show. We don't have many notes here, which you can probably tell. All of your calls are coming in. We've got so many messages. Let me read a few of those out at 7 o'clock. We've got Talk. Morning, Charlie. Just one question. What do you think of Tottenham? Great programme. Keep up the good work. That's from Daniel. Thank you so much. I think that's a nod to what happened over the weekend where Spurs have failed to win again. It seems to me a recurring factor. Failed to score, indeed. You're absolutely right. We'll be talking sports a little bit later on. I think Daniel might know that I'm an Arsenal fan, but I will try and remain professional in this hot seat and not judge or gloat too much. Only kidding. 03444991000 is the number to get all your calls and texts in. We've got a few on politics. Susan Hall, this is from Amanda, says that she is head and shoulders above anyone else. If only she would stand for London Mayor. I say this as a Reform UK voter. That is very interesting, Amanda. Susan Hall was the Conservative candidate at the last mayoral election. We're talking about that this morning because James Cleverly has decided to leave Kemi Badenoch's shadow cabinet to pursue the Tory party leadership campaign. The mayoral campaign. He had pursued the Tory leadership campaign. He came close to winning that leadership campaign against Kemi Badenoch, but fell slightly short. He's now pursuing the mayoralty for London. Can he do it? 03444991000. Let me know your thoughts about that. Morning, Charlie. The right parties don't need to unite. If people of this country want to get this country back, they should all vote Reform and nobody else like we did in the Brexit vote. But I'm afraid that won't happen and we will lose our country. Not quite sure what that means about Brexit, but that's from Chris, who thinks that Reform are the answer. Let's talk to someone who does know the answers to a number of these questions that we're asking this morning. A brilliant journalist and friend of mine and friend of the show, Linda Jubilee, is down the line joining me now. I think. Good morning, Linda.
Good morning, Charlie. I don't think I know the answers, but I've got strong views.
Well, I hang on to your every word. And I know my listeners will do too, because this is the home of common sense, and you are absolutely full of that. That's for sure. Let's go to that main question that we're asking this morning. Should the right unite to stop a left-wing coalition? If there is to be an early general election, would it not be the most sensible thing to do to stop, if you want to stop Andy Burnham maintaining his role as Prime Minister, if you want to stop another Labour government should the right unite to thwart that?
Well, possibly. I think it's very interesting that there might be an early general election, because we wouldn't have said so even a few months ago, but it now looks like it is a possibility. And that is because there is a window of opportunity that has opened for Andy Burnham. Point one. Point two is, I don't think he has a clear enough backing, because as you pointed out just a few minutes ago, there was a coronation, there was no contest. So he will have to want to consolidate his position. And I think we might be going early to a general election. And that means, what do we do about the runners and the riders, as it were? So I think that there's a lot of talk, even months ago, about Reform maybe doing some kind of deal with Conservatives. But what I can't get over is I feel that Kemi Badenoch would hate to do that. She doesn't want to countenance that idea. And Nigel Farage is too much Nigel Farage to want to be co-joined to anyone else. The thing about Restore is, Rupert Lowe is popular in his own constituency, but he's only one independent MP. So how many MPs could he get feasibly in a general election? What's upsetting everyone, not upsetting as in they are concerned emotionally, but what is upsetting the apple cart, if you like, is that in several by-elections, Restore have managed to get a percentage of the vote, and that has split things for reform. So that is a problem. But how they are going to actually get together and unite is another matter. Sometimes people talk about coupon elections where deals are done, where it's obvious that one party is going to win and another is going to lose. But I can't see that happening at the moment because there's just too much snarling amongst all the parties.
Yeah, I think you're absolutely right. That was a local by-election that took place, as you say. I think it was a Conservative seat originally, I think. Reform were looking as though they were going to do better in that election. They obviously did in terms of their share of that vote. But with the addition of Restore on the ballot paper, where a significant vote might have taken that vote away from Reform, they would have won the seat, but instead it ended up going to a Green. And I think the more that we see of this in local elections just throughout the next 6 months or so, that might focus minds, would it not, to sort of, for Kemi and Reform and Nigel to sort of think, right, OK, even if we don't stand candidates down, we both say we're going to put up seats, we want a full slate, we want people across the country to be able to vote Conservative Reform, but we're just not going to campaign that hard in a seat that we know the other might do better.
No. So can I just say that you're talking about Dover, I believe. Now, Reform could have expected to win that vote, especially because of the issues that would have concerned people in that particular area of the country. But they didn't win. In fact, Restore as well in Makerfield took a bigger than expected percentage of the vote, and that quid the pitch for Reform as well. So I think Restore could end up being a problem. They might not actually get any seats, but they could end up being a problem for Reform.
A couple of things Reform focused in our national newspapers today. There's a lot of politics going around. It is, as I say, the weekend before Parliament returns and the politicians will be coming back to school, as it were. With Reform feeling as though that they are, I mean, they led in about 300 opinion polls. They seem to have sort of capped because, Andy Burnham has had this sort of burn and bounce. There is a story in the Express today, however, on the back of canvassing about 10,000 people. It's a huge boost for Nigel Farage, as a mega poll shows Reform would win the most seats at an election. So do you think Reform are chomping at the bit for an early general election?
I don't know. You're quite right to point that out. That's a very big survey. I think 10,000 people were actually questioned. So that's quite an important result to pay attention to. I think that Nigel Farage's problem is the thing about the £5 million gift, the donation, and Posh George, his fraudster supporter, that those issues aren't going away. And in fact, the investigation has now restarted into that gift. So, or donation, depending on how you want to characterise it. But I think Nigel Farage does continue to have a problem, but I think things are settling down a little bit after the disastrous, I think, but that's my personal observation, disastrous Clacton by-election. So he needs a bit more time, really, to get a grip with what he's actually doing. His biggest issue, I feel, is that he needs to be much stronger on his policies, clearly outline several, not one, several key policies, but also he needs to bring other members of Reform to the fore so that people stop looking at Reform as a one-man band. And that's quite difficult for Nigel Farage because he is the consummate performer. He is someone who is a showman. He likes to be the centre of attention, but he does have to remember he's got a team around him and he has to push that team forward the closer we get to a general election.
Well, a number of people in that team. You've got Rob Jenrick as the Shadow Chancellor. You've got Suella Braverman, who is the Shadow Education spokesperson. These are former Tories who have said, and Suella is writing she's written in one of the papers today, I can't quite remember which one it was, where she says that there is going to be no chance of a deal with the Tories, that the Tories betrayed the country.
And that's what, but Charlie, that's what I'm saying. There's too much blood under the bridge here for those sides to amend their fences. Common sense would tell you perhaps that is an option, but when you think about it, the cold, hard facts are that it would be almost impossible for some of those people to get together in any coalition.
So do you think there will be an early general election? Do you think this is an opportunity for Andy Burnham to say, right, actually, the right are so divided? You've got, Kemi Badenoch and Nigel Farage tearing lumps out of each other. You've also got Rupert Lowe and Restore still a thorn in the side of Reform, just on the back of the evidence that we were talking about with that by-election. Would this not be a perfect opportunity for Burnham to call an early general election?
Well, we don't know. We need to wait until we get beyond the autumn budget, and we need to wait to see how Andy Burnham performs at Question Time. Don't forget that people are paying, ordinary people are paying much more attention to things like Question Time these days because they are more concerned about some of the really big issues we face, and they want to know what politicians actually say on the stump. So I think Burnham has to get his feet under the table. He has to deliver a whole series of Question Times where he really walks the talk, and then he gets beyond the autumn budget, and then he can take a view.
Do you think he can walk the talk if he doesn't have notes at the dispatch box? We were hearing that the Prime Minister intends to sort of have a more informal approach to PMQs. He doesn't want to be seen as the stuffy old Prime Ministers of the past that turn up with their big red folders.
I'm certain he can. I mean, that is not magic. Talking without notes is not magic. And you had Graham Davis on earlier. He's a very experienced presentation coach. And I do a lot of presentation coaching and media training. The first time I saw someone do that was Hillary Clinton at the World Economic Forum in Davos. And she did it for nearly 2 hours without any notes at all. Now, someone who's in command of their presentation, in command of their brief, who understands the subject properly, speaks without notes, and it looks a lot better. But it's not magic. We shouldn't be awarding him a gold star because he speaks without notes. That's a superficial thing. What we need to pay attention to is what he's actually saying.
The two other examples that spring to mind, just anecdotally, I remember David Cameron, when he was pitching for the leadership of the Conservative Party, famously behind David Davis at the time, but gave a big speech in Blackpool completely without no notes. He was sort of parading, commanding the stage. That sort of really sort of set him up, I think. That's why everybody points to that as the moment where people thought, right, that's it. David Cameron is the future of the Conservative Party, as opposed to someone that had been there a bit longer, David Davis. The only other example I can think of and remember is Ed Miliband then tried it a couple of years later on at the Labour Party conference, but then failed to mention the economy when it was all about the economy and sort of was vilified for it. So it can backfire, can't it?
Yeah, the thing is that speaking without notes really allows you to connect with the audience. So in my view, it is better not to be behind the lectern. It is better not to have an autocue. It is better not to have a hard copy of your notes because you can lean right into the audience. And that's a really important skill. I mean, you can learn it, but most politicians don't bother. They hang on their notes and the autocue. And that actually, it doesn't destroy your delivery, but it definitely inhibits it.
Linda, thank you so much for everything you've said so far. Always a beacon of common sense here at Talk. 0344 499 1000. Let me know your thoughts about everything that we were talking about there just a second ago. Should the right unite to stop a left-wing coalition? Can Andy Burnham engage with the public better? Can he do without notes at PMQs that he'll be taking on as Parliament returns next week? Text the word TALK to 87222. Let me know what you think. All your calls and texts to be read out after this break. This is Talk.
scariest moment? Not that I want to admit it, but where was it? Was it in the middle of the night when somebody was by your tent? What was it that you thought, my God, I'm in trouble here?
To be honest, it was the moment where I'd been stopped. I'm running down to the beach. I'm trying to get to the water. You're so tired, and I get down to the bottom of the dunes. Next thing you know, bang. 6 coppers stop me and this other lad, and I'm thinking, surely not. Surely not. They'd never stop any of the migrants. How all of a sudden have I run down to the beach and the 6 coppers there?
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
Welcome back to Talk Breakfast with me, Charlie Rowley, sitting in for the legend that is Mark Dolan. Your calls and texts have been coming in thick and fast. We've got one here from Maggie, who says, "Morning, Charlie. Well, I've heard it all now. Free condoms to illegals." That's on the back of the front page of the Express that says free condoms are dished out to asylum seekers. All your hard-working taxpayers' money going on clear the priorities of this country. Thank you so much for that, Maggie. Talk. If the Tories want to do better, Kemi has to bring forward some seriously good ministers. So it isn't just about her. I'm hoping they're preparing some seriously good policies so they're ready if Andy calls an early general election. Well, there will be a bit of a reshuffle in the Tory ranks as James Cleverly stood down from Kemi's top team as he announced his intention to run for the Tory party candidacy for Mayor of London, so he's got to be replaced. There's a couple of other ministers that are standing down, because standing in from a shadow cabinet, I should say, because they're not standing at the next general election, and Claire Coutinho, the current education shadow secretary, is going on maternity leave. So there is a bit of a shuffle that will be taking place, and in the run-up to conference season, where all the parties go to all parts of the country to talk to the nation, to set out some of their policies, to basically have a bit of a knees up as well. It's all quite good fun. We'll be hearing more, I'm sure, over the next few weeks from all the parties, what they're going to be putting forward. If there is an early general election, there is talk no end in our papers today that is on the cards. Kemi Badenoch wants to have talks with the civil service to set forward her plans if there is an early general election, and if she's part of the next government, if she's the next Prime Minister, then the civil service will have to be ready to implement what it is that government wants. But if there is an early general election, should the right unite to stop a left-wing coalition taking place? That's one of the questions we're asking this morning, alongside what are the biggest issues you think Andy Burnham needs to tackle at PMQs as Parliament returns next week. 0344 499 1000, that's the number to call, or leave a voice note too. Look forward to hearing that, and you can text the word talk to 87222 or follow us and send us a message on X. Just start your message with @talktv and we'll get it read out if we can. Turning to the phone lines now, we've got Gary on the line from Northern Ireland. Hi, Gary.
How are you doing? Sorry, I was just ringing up about this condom trial. Three things in mind. Now, one is we are being told that it's mostly women and children coming across these hotels. Yet there's no sanitary towels being produced. Or is the condoms because there's so many of these guys coming in and saying they're gay that they don't want to spread diseases? Or is it number three, that these guys go out and commit crimes and it's easier for them to have condoms than for their DNA to be taken?
Well, we are, I think, seeing more men come across in the small boats crossings. You're absolutely right, even if we're told that it is women and girls. There are some, but the majority of people that make that small boat crossing are men of fighting age, men of working age. And I think this is just an admission by the Home Office, who have been telling us for so long that actually everyone that takes part in that small boat crossing, they're a genuine refugee. They are fleeing persecution. They are seeking refuge. They are seeking asylum in the UK, and we should be opening up our homes to them. And by the way, on the way in, don't rape anybody, don't attack women, don't sleep with children, and here are some condoms for you. I mean, it's beggars belief, isn't it, what's happening to our country?
Said that they do not get those booklets unless they commit a crime.
Well, I think they get the booklets on the way in. It's a sort of a way in which the Home Office can say, right, we've now told you what we expect. Here are the laws of the land. Because then if they do go on to commit a crime, I think it's basically an insurance policy for the government now. If they do go on to commit a crime, at least the government, and they have to be deported, you know, the barrister who's fighting the claim on behalf of the government can say, look, we did tell them. We did make it clear that those are the laws of the land. You can't go and commit rape or sexual offence.
Was that done through an interpreter? Or was that read to them in English, which they can't understand? But the Catholic Church has another big part to play in this. They're welcoming them in. And as the Catholic Church should tell you, it is against the law of the Catholic Church to use condoms. So if these boys have transferred to Christianity, why are they getting condoms?
Very good question, Gary. Very clear views on condoms in general. Let me know what you think about that front page of the Sunday Express, where free condoms are dished out to asylum seekers who enter our shores. 0344 499 1000. Thank you so much, Gary, for taking the time to call us on a brilliant, beautiful Sunday on this bank holiday. Chris is on the line. Chris from Oxford.
Good morning, Charlie. How are you?
Morning, Chris. I'm very well. How are you?
I was all right until I was listening to the programme this morning.
Oh, dear.
Burnham is just going to do the same as he's done before. He's going to try and make himself look good without doing anything at all. You know, his policy so far is take money off the buses, reduce a little bit off the electric, when he should be concentrating the electricity or the energy costs for a start. I mean, it's all right him saying, oh, well, the boat crossings are down. Well, never mind the boat crossings are down. By the time he stops them all together, there will be tens of millions of people in here illegally. You know, he's not got... What we need is actually an immediate general election. And let's see where they reside, because I think the majority of the country will throw him out, never ever to be re-elected again.
So do you think we're on, Chris, we're on the road to an early general election? I mean, I was talking with Graham Davis, presentation coach, early this morning, and it seems as though the last 6 weeks over the summer holidays, Andy Burnham has, as you say, he's gone for that low-hanging fruit, you know, so he's taken... VAT off our hospitality sector, something that his predecessor, Keir Starmer and Rachel Reeves, put up in the first place. He has capped bus fares. They were originally at £2 a pop under the last Tory government. They were put up to £3 by Labour, but now back down to £2. And he's been telling us not to light barbecues over the summer. But these are he's trying to swamp the media landscape, isn't he? He's trying to look busy in order to then sort of say, oh, OK, he's actually very busy. He's, you know, he's a nice guy as well. He seems to be across everything that we're all talking about day in, day out. But when it comes to the big-ticket items about energy costs, about living costs, about welfare, about the migration crisis, you know, he's missing in action, isn't he?
Yes, he is. And it's no good Kemi Baylock going on about, oh, we will deport all the... All they're doing, the Conservatives, is copying reforms policies they've already announced. She never before, ever, and the party never before, said anything about removing illegals from this country. Now, all of a sudden, she's all for it.
So if, as you say, that the Tory party is copying reforms policies, why don't they just get together? You know, why can't they be an unstoppable force, you might say? They would command, if the polls are correct, they command a good 45%, if not more. Because,
mainly because after what the Tories did last time, and I always used to be a Tory voter for life, no more. I'm now a Reform going to be a voter, because you cannot trust them any longer, the same as you can't trust the Labour Party. They will need to go a hell of a long way before anybody will trust them again in government, because what they say and what they do are two totally different matters.
So you used to be a Conservative voter, you've now gone to Reform. Restore doesn't interest you at all, Chris?
Well, Restore, I mean, there's already come out that he's a bit of a bully. And his ambition, I would say to Nigel Farage, don't take him on, because all he's trying to do is get in there and then try and kick Nigel out of office so he can be the big man.
Are you talking about Rupert Lowe, I'm assuming, I think you're talking about?
Yeah, Rupert Lowe.
So Rupert Lowe, I think allegations were put against him that he was sort of, he'd confronted Zia Youssef. I think, the police were called on him, unnecessarily so, I think, in my view. But there's obviously been a falling out, you're absolutely right, and that's why Rupert has obviously left to then set up Restore in the first place.
I think the Restore voters will come over to Reform come a general election, because I don't think that they are going to... I mean, let's face it, they're not going to win a general election with the numbers they've got, so they would be far better to ensure that Labour's kept out by coming over to Reform and joining with them in a general election.
Well, I think you're right. That's a lot of people are sort of discussing this, including Dan Hannan in the Mail today, because there was a local by-election not so long ago, last week, where there was a Green Party member that won. Candidate, actually, that won because there was a split vote between Reform and Restore, you could argue. So are we going to see that across the country? Are we going to see a divided right, letting a Labour government, letting a Labour or a left-wing coalition in through the back door?
Well, I would just brush off the Greens altogether. I mean, there is a nutty party that wants no police, no laws, let everybody come in, let everybody do what they want, led by a complete idiot that just doesn't know common sense. That's why you've got Common Sense Talk, because that's where common sense gets over everything.
Chris, I couldn't put it better myself. This is the home of common sense here on Talk, and it certainly is over weekend breakfast, certainly when I'm in the driving seat. Anyway, let me know your thoughts. 0344 499 1000 or text the word TALK to 87222. They are coming in thick and fast. We've got a message here from Shell that says, "Hi, Charlie. Your caller was absolutely right. The booklet is to make sure they don't ruin their asylum claim, and the condoms are to protect them from prosecution. It's not an admission. They just do not care about the innocent British lives, about the British lives they are ruining." Yes, well, I thought I did make that point. I thought it is the government just saying, look, we've issued a leaflet now, so we've told them these are the laws of the land, don't commit any kind of sexual crime or offence, and then, the government sort of, wash their hands of the situation. Talk. We need to get this government out. We need a general election now. We need Nigel Farage in number 10, who will put the people and this country first. That's from Mags, clear as day. She wants a general election in this country. Do you? Do you think we should be having a general election? Is it the right time for a general election? We've just had one, haven't we? I mean, it's a couple of years ago, but it feels as though it's only yesterday. We go through so many elections in this country at the minute. Let me know what you think. Chris says, "Morning, Charlie. The right parties don't need to unite. If the people of this country want to get this country back, they should all vote Reform and nobody else." And, well, that's from Chris. Again, you've got to take into account that there are other parties out there. Restore took a chunk load of votes at a local by-election, which might have cost Reform, you can argue. They came a very close second, letting in a Green candidate through the back door. The Conservatives polling at about 22%. They are holding firm. Can they be the party that actually, in the next year or so, maybe comes forward if more policies are announced? As I was talking with Graham Davis, presentation coach, earlier on, if more policies come forward from the Tory party, can they turn the tide? Can they be the party that unites the right? 0344 499 1000. Get all your calls and texts coming in, and we'll be turning after the break on this bank holiday morning to Simon Calder, travel correspondent extraordinaire. I know many people will be travelling on this bank holiday weekend. Let me know if you're stuck anywhere. Let me know if it's been travel chaos for you, but we'll be getting all the latest from Simon after this break. Stay tuned. This is Talk.
across the UK. On DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk. Oh.
Good morning, Charlie. I hope your show is going well. Well, I hope it's going well too. Dean, our extraordinarily brilliant executive producer. It's giving me the. I've been cancelled. I could be cancelled by the end of this, couldn't I, Dean? It's not going that well. No, we're all having a great time here on Sunday breakfast here at Talk, the home of common sense. But Gary, he says, I'm just in Luton Airport. Just a travel thing, he says. I didn't check in online, so I had to go straight to the booth. And strange enough, it was £45 each because we hadn't checked in online. That was from Wizz Air. That was the airline that he was travelling with. That's from Gary in Rutland. You don't check in online, it costs you 45 quid. I didn't know that. I mean, I do always check in online if I'm ever allowed a holiday. But that's interesting to know. Let me know some of your thoughts about the bank holiday weekend. Have you been travelling somewhere? Are you on the way to somewhere? Have you just got home from somewhere? Were you caught up in the travel chaos over the last couple of days where there was the attack on, cyber attack, I think, on Manchester's Stansted and another airport? Let me know. 0344 499 1000. But there is someone who does know everything travel related that is happening across this bank holiday weekend, and I'm delighted to say he joins me now, travel correspondent Simon Calder. Hi, Simon.
Oh, Charlie, first of all, can we go to Luton Airport and try and help, is it Gary?
Gary from Rutland. Yes, please,
yeah, okay.
Please.
So, unfortunately, both Wizz Air and Ryanair make it fairly clear that you've got to check in advance of getting to the airport. And if you don't, it's going to cost you 45 in the case of Wizz Air. I think now 55 in the case of Ryanair. They say it's because our systems require everybody to check in online in order to keep things efficient. But ultimately, of course, other airlines do not. EasyJet, British Airways, Jet2, if you don't check into the airport, you will still be okay. So I'm sorry about that. When they will have sent out multiple emails reminding people of this, but of course you get lots of, dare I say it, junk emails from airlines as well, asking you if you want to buy premium parking and stuff. So my sympathy there with Gary. I hope he has a lovely time wherever he is going, anywhere, although it's difficult to get lovelier than Rutland.
Yes, I think you're absolutely right. Well, thank you for that. Best of luck, Gary, and I hope you enjoy the holiday wherever you are. If you're able to tell us, do let us know. Tell us, Simon, what else is happening in the world of travel? Is there chaos like there always seems to be over this bank holiday weekend?
Yes, it's sort of chaos that we knew about. Of course, bank holidays spell network rail engineering work, and therefore here I am at London Waterloo, and if you were going to Guildford via Oxshott, if you're going between Farnham and Alton, then you're going to find that you're on a bus replacement service, and that's the sort of thing that we knew about in advance. Crucially though, there are basically 4 north-south intercity lines, and well, they've all got problems. So the East Coast Main Line, that's the line linking London with Yorkshire, northeast England, with Scotland, and that is closed south of Peterborough. That's forcing people to use the East Midlands Railway, which runs from Bedford down to London, but also starts in Sheffield with Nottingham, Derby and so on. However, that is now on reduced trains because there's a strike today and tomorrow by members of the RMT union. Then you go across to the line from Derby down to Birmingham. That's interrupted with diversions, as is the line from Wolverhampton to Stafford. So any of those north-south runs are looking tricky, as a result of which people are looking for alternative transport, because you would, wouldn't you? And if you look at the, okay, it's the end of the Edinburgh Festival and Fringe, and so from the Scottish capital, British Airways has been charging up to £1,222 for a one-way flight from Edinburgh to Heathrow. So that works out the time you would be spending in the air. That's about £20 per minute. However, that is in business class, you'll be glad to learn. So while you're spending that money, you'll get a cup of, you'll get a glass of champagne. And also, even if you're thinking, well, there's always the bus, Flixbus, over £110 from Scotland to London. That's a trip of about 10 hours. Slightly more than I would like to pay for that. So if you can avoid travelling today, north-south in the UK by rail, you will be doing yourself a favour.
I mean, those are extraordinary prices, as you say, if you're just coming from Scotland. And I know that's a business class ticket, not something that I've had the pleasure of travelling in. I have to say I will be amongst the sort of the Wizz Airs, the EasyJets, the Ryanairs, if ever I'm travelling, as best I can. But extraordinary numbers there. And if you're paying for a ticket or a bus that's delayed, for example, you talked about the Flixbus there. I mean, is there compensation available to people? Or what kind of compensation can they get if there are stoppages or breakdowns or delays just on the rail network?
Okay, the rail network. If you're on a trip which you kind of knew about engineering work and strikes and so on, and you're delayed, then unless you're delayed more than the kind of rehashed timetable, you're not going to get anything. Delay repay, which is actually not a bad system, is for when things go wrong on the day that nobody was expecting. So you might get a small amount of cash back in the skies. That's where you've got the strongest rights, because a delay of over 3 hours means that you're in line for cash compensation unless the airline can demonstrate it wasn't its fault. And actually, we've had more than 100 cancellations on EasyJet alone on Thursday and Friday. But the airline can reasonably say this was due to unfortunately, thunderstorms across Europe, and that caused mayhem with the schedules. Luckily for Gary today, and for anybody else coming in and out of the main airports, things seem to be going very well. I'll keep my fingers crossed as I say that. And on the roads, well, today, according to the motoring organisations, is going to be one of the busiest days of the bank holiday. And if you are already on the road, give yourself a pat on the back, although not when you're driving, that would be awkward, because starting off before 8 o'clock is a good move. If otherwise, wait until tea time, because that's when things will get quieter. It's the middle of the day over the bank holiday weekends that are particularly tough. And then, of course, tomorrow afternoon, it's going to be everybody heading back, so expect delays, for example, on the links coming out of the Lake District and out of Blackpool of the M6, going north on the M5 from Somerset and Devon towards Bristol and the Midlands. The M25, always busy, but particularly the western section tomorrow. And of course, things will just pop up wherever they do. And so, basically, good luck, everybody.
Good luck indeed. Sounds like a perfect way to end this morning. Thank you so much, Simon Caller, travel correspondent and expert extraordinaire on all things travel taking place across the country. If you are travelling, let me know if you've had a travel disaster over the bank holiday weekend, or if, like Gary, you've been stuck at an airport or being copped with other charges. Let me know your travel arrangements and how you're enjoying your bank holiday weekend. Hopefully you're spending it with me. 0344 499 1000, or text the word talk to 87222. Before we go to the break, some breaking news that has just reached us here at Talk Towers. It is the story that 2 of the killers of PC Andrew Harper are to remain in prison under plans to bar offenders jailed for manslaughter. That's from Labour's early release scheme. Andy Burnham has announced the Prime Minister today, making it absolutely clear that the 2 killers of PC Andrew Harper will not be released early. This is under the early prisoner release scheme, so you'd imagine that other offenders that are jailed for manslaughter will also not be jailed. I think that's probably the way that they've got around it. But those 2 killers of PC Andrew Harper are to remain in prison, announced by Andy Burnham today. Let me know what you think about that. 0344 499 1000. Should there even be an early prisoner release scheme? I don't think so. I think we can keep them locked up. I think we can stand up alternative Nightingale prisons if needs be to keep these vile felons incarcerated to serve out their sentence and not to be released early to live and walk amongst us. 0344 499 1000. We'll be talking to Mike Neville, former Detective Chief Inspector, I think, after this break. Stay tuned. This is Talk.
Scariest moment, not that I want to admit it, but where was it? Was it in the middle of the night when somebody was by your tent? What was it that you thought, my God, I'm in trouble here?
To be honest, it was the moment where I'd been stopped. I'm running down to the beach. I'm trying to get to the water. You're so tired, and I get down to the bottom of the dunes. Next thing you know, bang. 6 coppers stopped me and this other lad, and I'm thinking, surely not. Surely not. They never stop any of the migrants. How all of a sudden have I run down to the beach and the 6 coppers there?
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
Good morning, Charlie. Great show. Thank you very much. That's from Tracy. She says, I've really enjoyed this weekend, but I believe the 3 parties shouldn't unite. Rupert Lowe, unfortunately, has ruined the Reform Party potentially winning the next general election, which is extremely sad. That's from Tracy. She's got in touch on the back of one of the questions we're asking this morning, is that should the right unite to stop a left-wing coalition? Are the drumbeats so loud now that we feel that there is going to be an early general election? Kemi Badenoch has already written to the Cabinet Secretary asking for talks to take place because she thinks there could be one. Reform will be launching their conference next week, setting out the first 100 days of what they would do in a Reform government. Are all signs pointing to an early general election, with Andy Burnham seemingly having a Burnham bounce? He's now ahead in the polls, announcing today that the killers of PC Andrew Harper will not be released as part of the early prisoner release scheme, along with a number of other measures, I should say, over the summer. Has Andy Burnham flooded the media landscape? Is he now untouchable? Will he find himself in a situation where he's never or not as popular as he currently is, and therefore should call a general election now? 0344 499 1000. Let me know your thoughts on all of those topics. But I'm delighted now to be talking to Curtis Daly of Turn Left Media to go through some of those stories and more. Good morning, Curtis. Thank you for joining me.
Thank you. It's a real pleasure to be here. How are you?
I'm very well, and delighted to have you here with us also. Let's just talk about the Burnham bounce and the splitting of the right. How do you see the current political landscape? Should there be an early general election? Should Andy Burnham take matters into his own hands and, you know, test the mettle of his strength and call an early general election?
Well, you made a really interesting point. You know, you were positing the idea whether Andy Burnham is untouchable. He certainly isn't. And in fact, I think he's already made a series of mistakes already. His backtracking on nationalising water, for example. Nationalisation of public services is extremely popular across the political landscape. You've got majority reform voters who want it. You know, and these are normally called left-wing economic policies. And yet, Burnham's pretty much backed down on it. So he is not in a safe position. And the last time I came on your show, this is when I believe Keir Starmer was Labour leader. And I said, look, the problem with the Labour Party isn't just the leader. Of course, they have swapped leader. Yes, they've enjoyed a temporary polling increase. But the problem is the Labour Party. A lot of people are angry with the party. So Burnham has a lot of work to do. And turning around and saying, we're not going to nationalise water now, despite the fact that you've got the bosses making loads of money and our water isn't very clean, is really not a good move. So the right can, I mean, both the left and right can jump on this. I suppose the wider question now is, will the right wing unite? I mean, we saw in, I believe it was 2017, a fascinating election in which, you know, Jeremy Corbyn was Labour leader. All of the media pundits said he'd crash and burn. In fact, he got 40% of the vote, more votes than Keir Starmer, right? Even in 2019, he got more votes than Keir Starmer. Theresa May also increased her vote share, which led to a hung parliament. But you saw, I believe it might have been UKIP back then, or the Brexit Party, working with the Tories in some areas. And I think they effectively united the right in certain constituencies in the UK. So the right wing can unite. Whether Reform and Restore can unite, it seems like there's a real big issue between Rupert Lowe and Nigel Farage. I'm less, I'm more sceptical of that.
So how do you feel about the, you know, the outcome? If it is the case that, say, the Tory party and Reform do some kind of deal, whether it's an official pact, which I can't see happening, but certainly maybe a bit of a nod and a wink to say, right, you know, we know that we could do better here than you. Therefore, you know, you might put up a candidate, but you don't campaign so hard. You know, between them currently, they would command about 45% of the vote if they had that kind of agreement in place. That would be a centre-right coalition in government, wouldn't it?
I don't think it's as simple as that, because if let's say the Tories and Reform announce this pact, you can't just add both vote shares together, because you've got to factor in the idea that people don't want this sort of coalition or pact, right? There'll be Conservative voters who wouldn't ever want to vote for Reform and might not vote Conservative based on that. There are many Reform voters who hate this the previous Conservative government and will be angry at Reform, so they may lose votes. I think it could be a mistake actually for the Tories and Reform to announce this pact, because part of Reform's appeal, which by the way I think they're losing support overall, is the fact that they call Labour and the Tories the Union Party. Well, you can't really say that if you're going to go into some kind of coalition. I mean, there's a poll I'm sure you're going to bring up in a second, which has Nigel Farage the most seats. But in that particular poll, Labour are still ahead with 27%, Reform are on 25%. And I was looking at the poll of polls and average polls. Reform, you know, their peak was 31% last year. They haven't hit 30% in the polls since January or March, depending on which polls do you look at. So overall, Reform have lost support, but I don't think announcing a pact or deal with the Conservatives will help them. It could hurt them.
One of the other questions we're asking today, Curtis, is what are the biggest issues Burnham needs to tackle at PMQs? Now, some would say that actually, you know, calling a general election would be the right thing to do because, you know, if he wants to increase taxes, he's got to go to the electorate before that, because he's, the country voted for a Labour manifesto on the back of 2024, which said that they weren't going to increase national insurance contributions, income tax and VAT. So he hasn't got much wiggle room there if he wants to plug the black hole that's been created by his immediate predecessors. But what are the biggest issues he's got to tackle? Because, it doesn't seem to me the Labour Party want to deal with welfare. They haven't been getting on top of the small boats crossings. Crime, particularly in London, seems to be through the roof. These are huge challenges for the Prime Minister and the Labour Party. What are the biggest ones that you think he's got to tackle?
Cost of living. It's always cost of living. I appreciate the other issues you mentioned are salient for many people, but ultimately people care about their material conditions, the bread and butter. Can I afford to pay my bills? Can I pay my rent, my mortgage? These are the things that really matter to most people. So he has to deal with that. Now, of course, he has announced a series of policies such as capping the £2 bus fare, which was increased by Keir Starmer, by the way. It just shows the political nous of Keir Starmer, i.e. zero. But these are small policies. He needs broad, big changes to the economy. And I think if he deals with that, when people feel like the pressure of their day-to-day life has lifted, then that will be something that will be successful for the Labour Party. But do I think Burnham can make these sweeping changes? I don't, because ultimately you do have to make a political choice, which is to go after the wealthiest in society. And Labour, the Tories and Reform...
Well, we haven't got anyone. We haven't got anybody wealthy here, though, Curtis. They've all left.
They haven't left. They're still very much here. I mean, I've done this a few times now, in which the idea that the rich leave when you go after them, simply not true. I mean, Patriotic Millionaires did a study on this and found that doesn't happen. In fact, Rachel Reeves, again, I'm not a supporter of Labour or Rachel Reeves, showed that increasing capital gains tax brought in more revenue. But I'm talking about the big corporates, not small businesses. We should protect those big corporates, the multimillionaires and billionaires. Now, again, you might not.
But they employ people.
But that's Labour's social base right there.
But they employ more people, don't they? The big corporates, the big, the people with the big bucks, they are the ones that, are plugging this neat gap that, is existing in our country, where we've got more young people not in employment, education or training. It's the big corporates that we need. We need the big business people. We need those people with their deepest pockets to be in the UK paying tax in the UK. But they've all fled to Singapore or the United States.
Well, one of the suggestions that Andy Burnham has done, which is really wild to me, is to offer 10,000 workplaces, work experience places at Sainsbury's, unpaid. And it turns out that Andy Burnham also took money from Lord Sainsbury's. So it just shows you the kind of politics that pandering to the very wealthiest in society actually do. We have a job crisis, by the way. There's not many jobs out there, well-paid jobs. They're all being taken over by AI. So the idea that we need to rely on big business simply isn't true. In fact, what we need to do is spread wealth and power. We need more money in the pockets of working class people, because they spend more money and that creates more profits for small and medium-sized businesses. So I'm interested in getting local jobs for the high street rather than low-paid sort of Amazon, warehouse jobs, which there's a lot of issues there.
Well, we have a crisis in the jobs market. You're right. We have got lots of vacancies and we've got a lot of unemployed people, but we also have a record number of people on benefits. And you said you're absolutely right. I think the cost of living is the number one issue, but that is tied to immigration, isn't it? Because if you see people coming across a small boat in a small boat crossing, they are put up in free accommodation. They're getting benefits, a weekly sum. They're getting free days out at the expense of hardworking Brits, alarm clock Brits who are tuning in as we speak. People will just think, well, why bother? They think that the system is totally rigged, it's totally unfair. But hardworking Brits, as I say, do the right thing, get up every morning, play by the rules, pay their taxes, but they just see these taxes going to people who can work but choose not to, because you can earn more on benefits than what maybe you can do in a job at Sainsbury's, for example, or it's going to people that are coming into this country illegally.
I mean, obviously you can appreciate that I have a different view on this. I mean, people feel that. They absolutely feel that. I dispute whether that's really the case. If you look at immigration, for example, I mean, the idea that, well, there's a finite amount of jobs and you bring more people to the country, therefore there's less jobs to go around. But you're forgetting the demand side, which means that when immigrants come to this country, and most of them do work, they're also contributing to the demand consumer side, i.e. they spend more money, that also creates jobs. It's a very cyclical system. The economy is a bit more complex in that way. In terms of welfare, well, as a percentage of GDP, we're spending less than we were 15 years ago. And the majority of welfare goes on pensions. We have to remember that. Now, none of us wants to look at pensions and cut them, do we? But if we're talking about the welfare bill and not mentioning pensions, then I feel like we've been a little bit dishonest. In my view, instead of going after migrants or those on benefits, we should be going after those who take a lot of money out of society but don't really provide much jobs. Again, Amazon's a good example. They pay very little tax, and the jobs they offer are often very low paid and low conditions. I want to see like a small business boom, right? You're seeing high street jobs, good quality jobs, and it works in tandem with building up the high street as well, rather than just relying on these big corporates who often move anyway. And there's so many things the government can do. The government can do to protect that. I appreciate we have a short amount of time to really go into the nitty-gritty details of it.
No, you're absolutely right. I'm afraid we're going to have to leave it there. Curtis Daly of Turn Left Media. But the question is, who creates jobs in this country? It isn't government. It is our small and medium-sized business, which, to be fair, Curtis said, are the ones who are the bedrock of the economy. But let me know what you think. 0344 499 1000. What are the biggest issues Burnham needs to be tackling at PMQs? Is it the cost of living? Is it immigration? Is it the benefits bill, as Graham Davis was talking about earlier on? Let me know. Text the word talk to 87222. This is the home of common sense. This is Charlie Rowley sitting in for Mark Dolan on this fine bank holiday weekend of breakfast. This is Talk.
The Californian cash machine is out.
The ATM, the American ATM.
The American ATM has run out of dollar bills. And I think we really need to look at why they have done it and why now, because in my mind is very hasty.
This is breaking news. Meghan Markle is in talks, apparently, to return to acting with a role in Guy Ritchie's Netflix series, The Gentleman. But that would be pretty embarrassing for her, wouldn't it? Pretty humiliating.
I think it's undignified if you marry into the royal family. If you're in entertainment or something like that, actually, I think it's a very undignified thing, and I don't think that you should do it.
I think it's about money, and I think it's about position. I think it's sad that they're using, in a way, the children in this respect, because if this is not permanent, you shouldn't be moving kids out of schools at 5 and 7. You've got to act a bit more responsibly than that. So it looks like if they are enrolling them in the schools, it can't have happened on Sunday. It can't have been, these things, you can be Mick Jagger. You can't just ring up a school and say, I want to take my kids are joining you on such and such a date. There are procedures to enroll.
I think the kids are the answer to the whole thing. You're absolutely right, Julia. They're looking at the future. They're, as someone rather savagely described them, they're now middle-aged and not very interesting anymore.
God, if they're middle-aged, what the hell how the hell are we still surviving?
Does anybody actually care? Does anybody... Am I the only... I do not care about Meghan and Harry. I do not care at all. Not a gnat's backside, do I? Not at all. I don't care about Meghan and... I do not care about Meghan and Harry. If they walked in this room, I'd say, get out! I don't care about Meghan and Harry. Can I put that any more emphatically? I do not care. I love Angela Levin, but I don't care about Meghan and Harry, all right? It doesn't keep me awake at night. I don't wake up in the morning going, I wonder what Megs is up to. Never, ever does it cross my mind. I don't give a hoot about Meghan and Harry. Also this afternoon, Meghan and Harry have arrived in the... No, we're not going to do that, OK? I promise you. Have we made that clear?
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
A very good morning to you. This is Charlie Rowley sitting in for the legend that is Mark Doland here at Weekend Breakfast at the home of common sense. It is, of course, talk that you're tuning into. We've got a jam-packed 2 hours to bring you of this marathon 4-hour breakfast show. Your calls and texts have been coming in thick and fast. We're asking 2 questions this morning. Should the right unite to stop a left-wing coalition? This is on the back of a drumbeat that seems to be taking place across our country, that we could see an early general election. Andy Burnham is still ahead in the polls, announcing things left, right and centre, swamping the media landscape, looking busy. Would it be right for him to call a general election? He might never be as this popular as he currently is. And with a divided right at times, it seems, would it be the right time to call a general election for Andy Burnham? But the only way to stop that could be if the right unite. Let me know what you think about that. 0344 499 1000 or text the word talk to 87222. We're also asking the question, as Parliament returns next week. Yes, I'm sure you've missed it as much as I have. You'll be delighted to know all the politicians will be back in Parliament. But what are the biggest issues Burnham needs to tackle at PMQs? He'll be facing Kemi Badenoch across the dispatch box for the first time, and all the other party leaders in the Commons, which he says he'll be doing with no notes. I think there are some jobs that you can do without notes. Primarily this one, maybe. I mean, who knows? Who knows where this show goes half the time? But I think the Prime Minister should be a little bit more prepared. He should take it maybe a little bit more seriously if he wants to command the authority of the public, the media and the Commons. 0344 499 1000. That's the number to get in touch with. I'm delighted now to say that joining me live in the studio, a good friend of mine and the station, Mike Neville, retired Scotland Yard Detective Chief Inspector, to go through those stories and more. Good morning,
Good
Mike.
morning, John.
How are you?
I'm very well. I enjoyed last night. And
are you enjoying the bank holiday weekend?
I am going to do, yeah. I'll see my brother later to celebrate the Royal Navy.
Well, I think that's something we can all raise a glass to, and we should look after our armed forces and certainly our vets a lot more than what we currently do. I think most people would absolutely agree with that. But let's turn to our first story, if I can. This is on the back of Daniel Hannan writing in the Mail today that he says that if the 3 parties on the right can't do a deal, the left will take power again. So do you see that as the current political landscape of the country?
Yeah, it's quite frightening, isn't it? If you look at those Dover elections, I did the figures around. If you add up all the latest poll really that's come on after that, if you look beyond that to the Dover one, they're saying that there'll be 320 sort of Labour, SNP, Green, and you have throwing a few independents. There'll be more than the 325 needed to form a government. And if you look at the by-election in Dover, Reform should have won, but Restore took the votes off them. The left, as I say, they never sleep. They're always on the game, the left. If you look at that by-election down in Dover, the Lib Dems didn't put forward a candidate because they'll transfer their votes. The left will be tactical around voting. And if people, I think the Express said that Reform would be could have 277 MPs at the next Parliament. But that's no good if we've got 340 of this dreadful left-wing coalition who'll continue to wreck the nation.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. There is a story in the Express today that says that if there was an election, this is polling 10,000 people, so not a small pot by any means, that said that Reform would have, about 277 seats, I think it is. So they would be the largest party, not able to run a majority government, so they might have to either be, well, a very minority government, or they need to be propped up by alternative parties. So do you think, Mike, that, going into the next general election, whenever that is, there should be a pact of some kind, or just a little nod and a wink to say, right, OK, we've got to put up candidates because we want to see Reform as a new entity, for example, as a new party. They'll want to see how well they do in all parts of the country. So I don't think they're going to say, no, we're not going to stand candidates in these places. But we just might not turn up to campaign as much as we should or will do in some of the other parts of the country.
I think the biggest threat to Reform is Restore, really. Those, just that 5 or 6% that they snatch away, which we saw down in Kent, that's the biggest threat. But with the Tories and Reform, there really are some quite good geographical splits where you could say, well, better somehow for the good of the country, we cannot have a left-wing coalition of chaos. We just cannot have that. I am a Reform supporter. I make no secrets about that. But I just think sometimes you've got to be pragmatic. I have no time for the Tories at all. They wreck the country. Somehow something's got it. But we've got to be pragmatic. And 277, having the biggest party in Parliament is one thing. But if you can't form a government, we're just going to see more and more taxation, more and more immigration, more and more crime getting out of control.
So, I mean, just picking up what you said there, you do time for the Tories, but, you know, they might end up having to work with reform.
I agree, absolutely. So there's got to be pragmatism here, and I think that reform or Nigel Farage has been badly let down by the Tories in the past, and you can't blame him for really being angry about that. But I think we could look at some candidates and say, that sometimes with the policies now on the right, that you couldn't put a piece of paper between them, really. They try to compete to out-reform really. So we could look at some of the candidates. I think who has got to be targeted are these dreadful Tory Lib Dems in disguise. If they are standing up they have got to be driven out. And I think Kemi Badenoch, I'm not a big fan of hers, but I think she is doing her best to get rid of some of those wets, and Mrs Thatcher had all her troubles with them, didn't she? And they persist, and they must be driven out, in my view.
Well, the counter, I suppose, the Tory party has seen itself as being a one-nation party. It appeals to all parts of the country, and therefore you're going to get, it's always been a broad church, it would say, and, therefore it's got...
Too broad, I think. too broad and too many. And my big deal, actually, I've been asked in the past, which laws would you bring in? My biggest issue, and I see this with the Tories and Labour, is these professional politicians who, they go to a nice school, PPE degree at Oxbridge, then they're a special advisor, given an awful seat to campaign in. If they do OK there, they're given a safe seat. And Burnham, the Prime Minister, has never had a proper job. And there's a whole raft of these people. And I think unless you've worked for 10 years outside politics, you should be nowhere near that Parliament. When you go to Parliament, you should bring a whole raft of skills, whether that's as a businessman or a doctor, a teacher, a trade unionist, a nurse, a soldier, whatever. You bring left and right, you bring different things in there, but at the moment the whole political class needs shaking down.
Well, we dealt with the right, as it were, and to be fair to Kemi Badenoch, that's the kind of people she's asked for. She said, come forward if you're a teacher, if you're a plumber, if you're not, someone that's worked in industry. We need you. We need the party to be more like that again, rather than people, as you say, that might have just had a career in politics and then turned to media. Not talking about anyone in particular, that was a former special advisor and stood in a no-hate street.
Theresa May,
and Michael Gove.
It gets worse.
But let's talk about Andy Burnham now and the Labour Party, because we're asking a question again this morning: what are the biggest issues he's going to be facing at PMQs? What does he have to do to, I think, maintain his position in the polls? What has he got to do before? I mean, if signs seem to be pointing towards an early general election. Before he calls that, if he indeed is going to do that, what has he got to do to cement his authority as Prime Minister? And what has he got to tackle? What has he got to deliver on before?
Well, the first thing I think is immigration. That's in the news all the time. It's out of control. And people, I was watching a video down in Cornwall of two men running around with a machete in Cornwall. I think what's happened with the immigration, it was one time just an inner city matter. So people didn't see that, but now we've got these asylum hotels in Sussex, in Essex, Cornwall, all over the country, and everybody's having a taste of it, and they're thinking, do you know what, I really don't like what's happening to my... Bournemouth is the big one for me, because my daughter goes to school there. The fact I have to escort my daughter through the streets of Bournemouth, where my grandparents would have gone for a lovely holiday. I think the immigration, but he's got a real problem there, because on the left of his party, all his backbenchers, they come from this sort of charity sector, hope not hate, and he's got a real... They believe all these people are fleeing wars. All this, they live in a fantasy world, but that's what they are. So immigration's one of them. Then you can see the crime. These early release things are really... Burnham's a shrewd politician. We know today, haven't we? He's changed the fact that people who committed manslaughter and death by dangerous driving are not going to be released, because he is a shrewd politician, because he can see the public anger at this. They can see... And we've seen what's happened in Middlesbrough, and it just looks like broken Britain, because crime is out of control. There are no consequences to doing crime, and even if you get a consequence, you get let out early. So crime as well. But again, he's got a big problem there, hasn't he? Because somehow they've got to build prisons. I'll employ me. I'll have a load of them up for him in a couple of months. But it's again on the left, there's this real issue that they've never really agreed with prisons. The Greens want to abolish them, and a lot of the backbench Labour MPs will be the same ilk. So he's got that challenge that he's trying to please the public, but his parliamentary party are so left-wing that they'll be dead against that. And then, of course, you've got taxation. People just feel that life's unfair, that they're working hard, more and more money's coming in, and more money seems to be being squandered all the time. But again, on the left, they do like that. You know, they talk about, oh, we'll tax corporations, we'll tax big business. Almost like, well, we're taking money off them, we're not taking it off you. But if you tax the big business, they'll pass it on to the customer, so the customer ends up paying more. So it's a stupid solution. But again, ideologically, on the left, oh no, we won't tax the little people, we'll tax these multimillionaires and these big companies. But as I say, where do they think the big companies get the money from?
Well, I think, and that's exactly the kind of conversation I had with Curtis Daly just a second ago about why, you know, it's important to maintain people who are, you know, employing others. It's the people with those, you know, larger pockets that will be investing, that will be starting up businesses also, and will be employing people, and that's where the money goes round. What I want to ask you about is the early prison release scheme, which obviously you touched upon. This is breaking news today that Andy Burnham has now announced that the killers of PC Harper, convicted of manslaughter, will not be released early. That was the talk of the summer, that they could be caught up in this early prisoner scheme, prisoner release scheme. I mean, it is beggars belief that I think that we're at this point where there is a prisoner release scheme anyway. I know, you know, it came before successive Tory ministers. They always blocked it. They said, no, we don't need to do this. There are alternative measures in place. But Labour seem to have bought into it. They've been sort of spun that yarn by the civil service, and they've said, right, actually, no, we do need to release prisoners early. The Tories failed to build more prisons. But they've had 2 years, Labour, now to build prisons, haven't they?
They have. And as I say, but there's some easy solutions. Take over an old army camp, put some barbed wire around it and a dog, move all the women out of women's prisons. They're usually non-violent. They can go there. The men can go in the female prison, or put some porter cabins in the yard at Brixton Prison or wherever there's big spaces. So there's all sorts of solutions. But I think, again, it's this left-wing attitude that the criminals are really victims of society. We should be releasing them. But then it clashes with Burnham's desire to be Prime Minister because the public see it. And I feel sorry for the police, because not only are all these thieves, burglars, robbers, rapists being released early, so they've got more criminals now to chase around the street, you've also got the fact that the government will say, oh, we're putting them on a tag. And I know this is rubbish. That what they'll say is, we're putting them on a tag, and most people think, oh, that means you're locked up in your own house. I've done my personal research, and I found out that only 23% of tag breaches have anything done about it. And that might be the police coming around and saying, oh, Charlie, your tag's got off, don't do it again. So it's not even as though you go back to prison. So the tag business is a big, big fat lie that they're selling to the public. And it's just, I just think this prisoner release thing is bringing woe to society. And we've seen that, as I said, this week in Middlesbrough. Middlesbrough's like a microcosm, isn't it? A broken Britain. White and working class, so easily ignored for years because there's no fashionable money to be dished over there. Young men, feral, allowed to get away with crime. And it's seen no consequences. The police, you know, with one hand behind the back. The court's not dealing with them. And look what we've got, a dreadful society where people, the ordinary people, are the ones who want to work and live nicely. They live in fear, don't they, of evil gangs?
Well, I think a lot of people agree with that, and particularly, as you say, what's going on in Middlesbrough at the minute is a microcosm. It's something that is happening right across the country, but the focus, obviously, is on Middlesbrough at the minute for all the reasons that we know. Mike, stay with us for a bit longer if you will.
Of course.
And I'll get my tag checked during the break. 0344 499 1000. Let me know what you think about all the topics that we've been talking about so far, and that conversation that I'm going to be continuing to have with Mike Neville. This is the home of common sense. This is Talk.
scariest moment? Not that I want to admit it, but where was it? Was it in the middle of the night when somebody was by your tent? What was it that you thought, my God, I'm in trouble here?
To be honest, it was the moment where I'd been stopped. You know, I'm running down to the beach. I'm trying to get to the water. You know, you're so tired, and I get down to the bottom of the dunes. Next thing you know, bang. 6 coppers stop me and this other lad, and I'm thinking, surely not. You know, surely not. They never stop any of the migrants. How all of a sudden have I run down to the beach and the 6 coppers there?
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
Welcome back to Talk Breakfast with me, Charlie Rowley, sitting in for Mark Dolan, and I'm still joined by retired Scotland Yard Detective Chief Inspector and a man that knows common sense more than most. Thank you, Mike, for being with us still.
Pleasure.
We talked a lot about what's happening in the country with the political parties, the state of them. Should there be an early general election? Should the right unite? What has Andy Burnham got to do to get on top of things that are going so perilously wrong in this country? Another event that seems to go wrong most years, every year you could argue, is Notting Hill Carnival, which is taking place this bank holiday weekend. Now, as a former bobby, and more so than that, what is your view about the policing of Notting Hill and the carnival, where it currently is? Should it be moved? Should it be cancelled altogether? Just give us your take, because there are always issues about it, aren't there?
Yeah, I'm no fan of banning things, me, but there is a real... not only is there all the crime at Notting Hill, I mean, in 2024 you had 2 murders, 2022 you had a murder, then you had last year, you know, many stabbings, people arrested for assaulting the police, etc., etc. The biggest issue for me, from a policing point, I mean, the police officers, the Police Federation, like the police union, did a survey of their officers, and they were describing words like lawlessness, danger, no officer safety, and you only have to look at some of the crowd density. And I was involved in the Hillsborough inquiry, and I'm claustrophobic, and to see a crowd like that crushed in together. And the danger is at Notting Hill, like Hillsborough, is that crush, because, of course, Notting Hill is urban streets with just brick walls. Brick walls don't give, you know, so if somebody shot a shot in the air, shouted something, pulled a knife, and there was a stampede, God only knows what happened. So I think the biggest risk to life there is a mass death, is a crush. And so I would say the best way to deal with this is to move it to Hyde Park, to put a fence around it, charge people to go in, a fiver, if that. I mean, it costs £21 million of taxpayers' money to finance it, so people could contribute towards that. And then if you controlled who went in, you could have facial recognition as they come in, you could look for drugs and knives. We know they've already seized, you know, I think 70 zombie knives or something before the event. And you could control things. At the moment, the selling of alcohol and food, the food is disgusting, some of it. There's no proper licensing around that, no proper checks. So all these things could be done.
I've never been, by the way, so I don't know about
Well, I don't recommend it, to be honest. I would never, you know, I went because I was paid to go on. I was there as a police officer, as a young PC, several times, and as a DCI, I supplied the human super recognisers who would spot the gang members. That's the other thing I did there. So... But the facts are, if it was moved to Hyde Park, all these issues could be dealt with and the thing could be celebrated. But what happens every time is anybody who suggests changing it is accused of racism and all this sort of thing. And the other thing it does is draws in officers. I mean, to give the scale of it, 7,000 officers. There isn't another police force in England, it's to show how big it is, who have got 7,000 officers. That's how enormous it is. And every one of those officers is drawn in, so they're not policing Clapham or Tottenham or Croydon or wherever they're supposed to be doing. And so it's a big drain, and they're all on double money tomorrow because it's a bank holiday, which is good if you're a PC, that's the wages you get. But it's still a massive impact on the taxpayer.
And is there a way it's policed problematic, or in your view? Because I don't actually have a problem, whether it's Notting Hill, whether it's Pride, or whether it's any other sort of big sort of celebratory event. I've no issue with the police, for example, maybe having a bit of a dance, with some of the party goers. You don't want, in my view, the police turning up looking sort of like they're just there to sort of arrest people, or they're there to sort of impose the law, which of course they have to do. But that kind of then gives a bit of a tension, as it were. That kind of creates a bit of an atmosphere even before the party or the event's even begun. So I've no issue with the trying to take that tension away by the police being more active and involved in the. But there'll be some people that say no, the police are there to police and they shouldn't be getting involved.
Well, there's with everything there's a happy medium, isn't it? I mean, we saw incidents with Notting Hill where female officers were almost being indecently assaulted by the dance and this twerking and whatever else. And there is people have said, police officers have said to me, and I know myself, said people openly smoking drugs, abusing the police, and able to get away with it really because one arrest could cause a big flare up. And people get away with it. And what I think what gets people is that, and I always use this example, that if you did what you could do at Notting Hill at Millwall Football Club on Saturday, you would be arrested. So it's like, I think that grinds at people, and they see this. But the whole thing, and it's just, as I say, and the police officers are often unable to act anyway because you just see the crowd density, and which adds on to the danger that we've already discussed. But it is a big mess in my view, but it's got such support, and every time the police suggest a change, this accusation of racism is thrown at them.
A crime in the capital seems to be going up. The mayor will tell us that homicide is coming down. I mean, that's great.
No bad thing.
No bad thing. But it's going to impact maybe on not a large number of people, I would have thought, in the first place. But it's the crime that people care about: the phone thefts, the bike thefts, the shoplifting that takes place in our capital. Former Home Secretary, former Defence Secretary, former Foreign Secretary, James Cleverly has thrown his hat into the ring. He wants to become the Tory party candidate. What do you make of his prospects versus Leila Cunningham versus Sadiq Khan if he runs for a historic fourth term?
To get a right-wing mayor in London was almost impossible, I would suggest, with the levels of immigration that have been brought in, the younger people who tend to vote for Green or Lib Dem. I think Boris was incompetent and buffoonish as a prime minister, but the sort of that laughable buffoonishness sort of carried him as a character. I think James Cleverly is a professional man. He was reserve colonel, wasn't he? I think he is. But I just don't think he's got it to be the mayor because of it's all right being competent, professional, knowing what you're doing. But he's not really a character like Boris could. That's the only way I think somebody from the right could get in to be that sort of lovable buffoon.
I mean, do you think the Mayor of London, currently Sadiq Khan, do you think he should run for a fourth term? I mean, there was a poll out a couple of weeks ago that said most Londoners just wouldn't prefer him to stand. They think 3 terms is enough. He's now in the House of Lords. He's been Sir Sadiq. He's now Lord Sadiq Khan. That would be too much for one person.
Well, I don't know. Does he like the money, or does he like that? I don't think there's much power in it, really. They don't have much power. It's more of a...
But it's profile, isn't it?
It's a profile. But if you look at his record, it's absolutely shameful with crime. But I think he will carry on because he likes carrying on. He likes to be the mayor, and he'll carry. And I think if he is the Labour Party candidate, he will get in.
I just want to read some messages to you, if I can, Mike. Let's go for Steph, who says the Tory party is not right wing. So why do you insist on including them? Oh, it puzzles me. So we're talking about uniting the right. Steph doesn't think that the Tory party is particularly right-wing at all. To your point earlier on, maybe packed with too many Lib Dems or people...
Well, it was, but I would say that if you look at Kemi Badenoch's policies around, immigration now, leaving the ECHR, I think I would agree with Steph that in the past they've been awful, dreadful Theresa May on this. But it's I just think
I'm not a fan of Theresa May. My poor Mrs May. I thought she was one of the longest Home Secretaries, longest serving Home Secretaries in a job that sort of where the civil service do seem to have a way of running its. They do sort of pull the wool over the eyes of the Home Secretary.
A problem shelved is a problem solved. I think that was Theresa May's motto. But I think Steph's right to call out the Tories for being sort of Lib Dems in disguise. But I think there is a new drive to out-reform reform if you look at the policies. So when I say about putting them into one bag, I think we could... The country is very much polarised, isn't it, with left and right, and I think the Tories would fall on the right side of it.
Maggie says, Charlie, Restore supporters should hold their nose and vote Reform at the next general election. See how they do. If no good, then next time round, vote Restore. Simples. But this pathetic Labour government must go. That's from Maggie in London. Thoughts about that?
Well, I just think at some point Rupert Lowe and Nigel Farage have got to get in a room and say, look, for the good of the nation, sometimes you've got to bury the hatchet. I know people feel really angry about how they've been treated, but sometimes sometimes you've got to sacrifice things for the nation, and the country's got to be given a fair choice. If you want to vote for a coalition of chaos and the breakup of the United Kingdom, I would suggest, with Plaid Cymru and SNP and Sinn Féin involved in a left-wing pact with Labour, the Greens and Lib Dems, then that's one thing. But if you're not in that camp, then somehow the right-wing parties have got to come together for the good of the nation.
Final one here from Joanna from Salisbury says, hi, Charlie, you're a treat on a bank holiday. Well, thank you very much, Joanna. Andy Burnham has already set himself up for the PMQs by giving the best-paid train drivers in Europe a pay rise to stop them striking. That's on the back of, I think it's the front page of the Times today that says there's a settlement now with ASLEF, the union train drivers that earn 70k as a starting salary will now be even paid even more.
Which is amazing. My father used to say about, he lived in France, and he was saying, like, the train drivers can get all this money and they retire early. Of course, when you're in the steam train in an open cab with fumes belching in your face, you were going to die, weren't you? Because now you sit in an air-conditioned cab and press stop and go. It seems a lot of money, doesn't it? I mean, good luck to them. I mean, they're the union. They fight their cause, don't they? But I think in the end, driverless trains will come in, won't they? In the sense that why do you need a driver if you can control it all by computers? But they're,
safety, I suppose. People might want to still want to drive on those long-haul journeys. So let's draw it to a close there. Mike Neville, thank you so much for joining me, retired Scotland Yard Detective Chief Inspector. More of your calls and texts after this short break. This is Charlie Rowley sitting in for Mark Dolan here at Weekend Breakfast. This is Talk.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
Very good morning to you. Welcome back to Talk Breakfast with me, Charlie Rowley, sitting in for Mark Dolan. And this Weekend Breakfast show is nothing if not varied. And so I'm delighted now to be joined by the Director of Sport at The Sun, Sean Custis. Thank you so much for joining me.
Morning.
Sean. Now, we were just talking off air. I'm an Arsenal fan, a season ticket holder. People that have seen me covering these shows before know that. So I'm not going to gloat too much. But tell us everything that's happened over the weekend from the Premier League on.
Well, we had
sure
quite a bit of fun. Me being a Newcastle fan, had quite a bit of fun yesterday as we did our normal beating of Spurs, who I'm told had the best transfer window of everybody. They won the transfer window, apparently. Over £300 million spent, including in their midfield, Sandro Tonali, who got remorselessly jeered by the away fans from start to finish as Newcastle beat Spurs 2-0 quite easily, really. And the Spurs project under De Zerbi is not really up and running. They're bottom of the league. I know it's early. No goals, no points. But it's a bit ominous. Look, they've got new players coming in. Savio, who got injured during the week against Charlton and couldn't play yesterday, so that was a bit of a blow for them. But they need to get it together, because once you start like this and you're playing catch-up, it gets tough. And you see your big rivals across the road going off and running ahead and continuing how well they did last season. It's worrying signs for them, I would say, at this stage of the season, even though it's so early.
And it's the fans, isn't it? I mean, they're playing in one of the best stadiums I've ever in the Premier League,
Brilliant
and
stadium.
and just hovering above. Well, they were in the relegation zone, weren't they, last year? But just managed to claw their way out,
as they did the year before. But of course, that was slightly tempered by the fact they won the Europa League, so they had something to cheer about. But each year you think, oh, they'll be all right now, they've got to make progress, they're going to get out of it. 17th is not really a true reflection of who Spurs are. And then we start this season, all that money spent in the bottom of the league. And psychologically, it's not great.
And you talked about their neighbours. Obviously, this, again, my team, Arsenal, playing tomorrow against Villa, up against former manager for Villa. Arsenal
and it didn't work out for him at Arsenal. And you Arsenal fans mocked him quite a bit, really, didn't you? I'm not saying you did personally, Johnny, but you weren't having him really by the end, where you didn't think he was quite up to it. PSG, he'd come from PSG, which is quite a pretty big club, but Arsenal fans never took to him. And he has rebuilt his career brilliantly. Villa showed actually that what happens when you allow the manager to be in charge of his club. And just recently, he is losing that authority a little bit. Lots of players being sold that he doesn't want to be sold. And he actually wanted the power that Arteta's got at Arsenal now, and he was never quite allowed to have it. So, look, it was probably right they split up in the end, but I think he certainly proved himself at Villa, definitely. Later today, just talking about, we were talking about Spurs before, Man United really need to redeem themselves, don't you think? Losing to Hull, who are second in the league, remarkably, joined with maximum points after another win yesterday at Coventry. But Man United lost to Hull last week, and Michael Carrick, the manager, has been getting pretty prickly about criticisms of United last season. Oh, it's very easy to say, it's lazy to criticise this and that and the other. Sometimes you can play really well and lose. Well, I don't think they played really well last week. But he says he's seen great signs in training this week that they're going to make up for it. And, of course, they're home to Ipswich, another newly promoted club, who they should beat. But already, if they were to lose that or not win it, there'll be big questions about them, because Man United, the scrutiny on Man United is like no other club in this country. I mean, it's absolutely intense. I mean, even Arsenal... there's a scrutiny on Arteta was massive at Arsenal, but it's infinitesimal, I think, compared to what you get at Man United and Carrick.
Yeah, I mean, look, they're absolutely huge club, and I suppose you're absolutely right. It's those questions. They've all had a summer period where they've got to reinforce their teams, where they've actually got to get show ready, as it were, for week one of the Premier League. Spurs have had that same opportunity, haven't quite lived up to the mark. Carrick again. When you've got teams like you say, Newcastle, that have had a new manager brought in, but seem to be firing on all cylinders. For what it's worth.
Yeah, absolutely. We do.
But Liverpool aren't firing on all cylinders.
No, they're not. Two draws. But Bradley Barcola is arriving, £123 million worth, and it looks like Cody Gakpo's going out the door, probably to Manchester City. Spurs were in for him as well, but he probably had a look at that Spurs yesterday and thought, don't fancy that. Think I'll go off to Manchester City, who you would think don't need any more players, any more wingers, any more attacking players. You saw the way they played on Friday night. But yes, they still want more, and they're still spending. It's incredible, really. I do not understand how they can keep spending and keep spending and keep spending, and my poor little bereft club, Newcastle, can't spend a penny, despite being owned by the richest owners in the world. I mean, it's just astonishing, really. I don't quite get it.
Well, you talked about Hull, just to tag back, obviously winning against Man United. They played Coventry yesterday. Coventry, who obviously Arsenal beat on the first week, so it's slightly unfair putting basically the top against the bottom. But I hadn't realised and forgot, and really should have looked into, that Coventry had been out of the league. I mean, it took 22 years for Arsenal to win the thing again. But Coventry, 25 years out.
A long time, and had a very traumatic time during that period. They were moved out of their own ground. They were playing games at like Northampton and places before. I mean, they were really on the floor. So to achieve what they have, to get back into the Premier League, is brilliant. But it's going to be hard work. I really like Frank Lampard as a manager. I think he's a top bloke. I think he's had a bit of bad luck as a boss, but he will be good for Coventry, I'm sure. And look, it is about them staying up this season. I think they've shown a little bit to suggest they will do it, but it's going to be hard. But they fight. They do fight pretty well. That one yesterday, though, was a real these are the sort of teams we have to beat.
Yes,
Hull City, you know, it's so important to them, and they just couldn't do it.
So two impossible questions, two final questions if I can. Who then is going to be the first manager to get sacked, do you think? Is that too harsh on a week two of the Premier League?
Well, I don't think you're looking at me sort of gloating. Oh, well, look at the Spurs manager. I don't think it's going to be him. They've invested a lot of time in De Zerbi.
But it'll be Frank Lampard? I'd be stupid to get rid of Frank Lampard.
I don't think that'll be.
Or Carrick, maybe Mike Carrick.
He's under a lot of pressure. I don't think they can go very long not winning. So yes, it's distinct. But if you're just looking at the Premier League, you might say he's got a very good chance of being the first one out. In the bookies' odds, I think he is top to get the sack. So yes, but Man United managers always under huge scrutiny. So I feel for him slightly.
It's a very unfair question, I know. So everyone in the campaign of them all, but let's see how that goes. The final question is transfer gossip. Are Arsenal going to get Julian Alvarez? Come on.
Look, well, the thing is, this is weird, isn't it? Because he plainly does not want to join Arsenal, right?
Yes.
But he doesn't. He wants to go to Barcelona. Atletico Madrid say, we're not selling you at Barcelona. You go to Arsenal or you stay here. I don't know why Arsenal fans would want a player who doesn't want to come, even though and I'll liken it to when Michael Owen was signed by Newcastle United from Real Madrid back in 2004. And he didn't want to be there. He signed on deadline time. He wanted to go back to Liverpool, but he signed on deadline time. And he made it abundantly clear throughout his time at Newcastle United that he didn't want to be there and barely played. I think it's a huge risk if you take somebody who doesn't want to be at your club. They need to be invested in it, surely. He is a good player. There's no doubt about it. He was unlucky, really, at Manchester City. He had some really, really great players around him. And he's done very well since he left, scored a hatful of goals and done well for Argentina at the World Cup. But I personally would tell him, no, we're not interested. If you don't want to come here. There's talk of him coming to Arsenal, and Arsenal would put in maybe a nice buyout clause so that Barcelona could come behind. But what was the point of that? Arsenal is supposed to be a club who are building to beat everybody else in Europe. You don't do it to facilitate one of your opponents like Barcelona. And Arsenal should consider themselves on a par with Barcelona. So no, I wouldn't be helping out there. Can I just mentioned the boxing last night.
Of course, yes, which I didn't watch. I was in bed by then.
I was there.
Yeah. Oh, great.
And, I mean, honestly, I wish they would start earlier than 11 o'clock at night. 11 o'clock at night, Moses Tomey came on, and he was considered Britain's greatest young heavyweight hope for years. I know we've got Daniel Dubois and the like, but this one was really, really special. 21-year-old, brilliant fighter. And he got schooled by a guy called Filip Hrgović from Croatia, who is clearly not as good a technical boxer as him, but soaked up all the punches, waited for him to punch himself out, then finished him off. And it was a lesson for Atoma that you can't just go swinging and think you're going to knock everybody out straight away. He'd riled Hrgović a little bit as well, and Hrgović had said he's only a kid, he doesn't know what he's doing, and he was proved correct. I mean, it was an amazing night. It was a great fight. It was very entertaining. But it's a big reality check for poor old Atoma.
Have we put too much pressure? Is there too much pressure on?
He talked himself up as well, and his promoters have talked him up. I had people near me talking about the fact this kid is going to be the greatest. I mean, spectators in the stands, you'll see it on social media. It's not like the old days where only the press were doing the talking and the TV. Now everybody's doing it on social media, so you can't just blame us as journalists for saying, oh, we've talked him up too much. You get a great prodigy like that, you see what he's like, and you can't help but think this is going to be a great player. I mean, did we talk up Lionel Messi when he first came into football? Did we talk him up too much? Did we put too much pressure on? No, he coped with it. Did we talk Wayne Rooney up too much? No, he was brilliant at 17 years old. Different sport with Tiger Woods. Did we talk him up too much? No, we knew he was brilliant. So I don't think there's anything wrong with it. It's how they deal with it and how... Look, this might just be a little lesson on the way to a stellar career. But it's a warning shot, and may not be a bad warning shot for him, that he's got to be... You've got to learn your craft, probably, a bit more. I'm no boxing expert, but it was easy to see that he'd misjudged this fella.
Well, it sounds like you had a good night anyway, though. There, or
Well, I think I must sleep, but I've had a good night.
Well, quite right. And you've got a show on in
9
Sister
o'clock.
Station.
Thanks. Yes, so everybody's switching off here and going over to Sunday Edition with myself and Henry Winter at 9 o'clock on TalkSport.
I look forward to tuning in at 10 after this. Sean Custis, Director of Sport at The Sun, thank you so much for popping in and joining us this morning. After the break, we'll be going back to the questions that we're asking viewers and listeners today. Should the right unite to stop a left-wing coalition, and what are the biggest issues Burnham needs to tackle at PMQs? This is Charlie Rowley sitting in for Mark Dolan on Weekend Breakfast, the home of common sense. This is Talk.
Scariest moment, not that I want to admit it, but where was it? Was it in the middle of the night when somebody was by your tent? What was it that you thought, my God, I'm in trouble here?
To be honest, it was the moment where I'd been stopped. I'm running down to the beach. I'm trying to get to the water. You're so tired. And I get down to the bottom of the dunes. Next thing you know, bang. 6 coppers stopped me and this other lad, and I'm thinking, surely not. Surely not. They never stop any of the migrants. How all of a sudden have I run down to the beach and the 6 coppers are?
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
Welcome back to Talk Breakfast with me, Charlie Rowley, sitting in for the legend that is Mark Dolan. On the back of the questions that we've been asking you this morning, should the right unite to stop a left-wing coalition? Lots of speculation in the press this weekend about an early general election. The Conservative Party leader, Kemi Badenoch, writing to the Cabinet Secretary wanting access talks so the civil service can be ready to implement a Conservative government should they win what could be an early general election. But will she be anywhere near office if the right don't unite? Because it may be with Andy Burnham leading in the polls as he is, he'd be able to secure a victory if an early one is called. We've got Mary on the line who has a view on this from Hemel Hempstead. Hi, Mary.
Good morning, Charlie. I don't see why they can't come to some sort of very quiet arrangement, the three of them, in fact, is tactical voting. Where there's no chance that the Tories are going to win, for example, they put in a candidate completely from outside, who's unknown, and not really plug him that much, who's prepared to do that, pay him a fee, obviously, for doing it, because he'd have to travel, whatever, and no, he won't win. And then Reform put somebody in for, bigger. And the same where they think Reform will win and where the Tories are likely to win, like, say, Maidenhead or whatever, there, they stand back themselves. And then whoever, the majority is the person, the winner.
So, Mary, this is a conversation about the Conservative Party, Reform UK and Restore all sort of coming together, whether officially or unofficially, to try and get a centre-right, right-wing sort of government in. Do you think that actually the Conservative Party should stand down candidates, that the Reform UK Party should stand down candidates, or do you think there should sort of be a sort of a smile, a nod, a little wink to say, look, OK, we know that you've got the best chance of winning a seat there as the Conservative Party, so we'll put up a candidate, but we won't send, as you say, that candidate down on that train fare every weekend to campaign that costs them a lot of money. We just won't campaign very hard. Do you think there should be an official pact or something slightly looser?
No, I don't. Well, I mean, it has been done officially before anyway with the other parties, but they don't necessarily have to do that. It's obvious they hate one another. I mean, I can't stand the Tories myself now, but if I had to, I'd have to hold my nose and vote for them because I wouldn't want, but I would vote Reform every time. But if it's made sort of discreetly, like, done discreetly, they just... They look as though they're doing something they can't, then they can't be accused of anything, and then whoever's the majority of that, who gets the majority of seats, is if they get the whole thing, they win and they form the next government. But it's got to be, they've got to come together somehow because this is just ridiculous what's happening. And
Mary?
John Healey, this John Healey, I understand that evidently the agreement for this ridiculous number 10 office that they've got in the north was signed in last September. Now, if that was done in September, they must have been planning this back then.
Oh, yes.
A year to get rid of Starmer. So that's obviously why Healey, now I think we're all realising why he liked to appear so honourable, and we all sort of thought, oh, well, at least one man who's not putting himself first. Now we all realise that was a fraud as well.
Well, Mary, you must have been listening to my early conversation I had with Gareth Davis, presentation coach that joined me for the first hour. We thought it was an honourable thing when John Healey resigned as Defence Secretary because he didn't think that he was getting the money that was needed from the Treasury to fund our armed forces. But it might now look and appear as though he knew all along that if he did that and that triggered the downfall of Sir Keir Starmer, he was in line to be Chancellor of the Exchequer. Great call, Mary. Thank you so much for joining me on Weekend Breakfast. Keep all those calls coming in and your thoughts and text messages 0344 499 1000 or text the word talk to 87222 or send us a message on X. You can follow us at talkTV, send that through and we'll get it read out. Now, going from sport to the Royals, I'm delighted to say that I'm joined now by Charlotte Griffiths, editor-at-large on the Mail on Sunday and good friend of mine in the show. Happy Sunday, Charlotte.
Happy Sunday. I feel like I'm gearing back up for work now after a summer off with the kids, and there's lots of royal news.
There has been. Let's start, if we can, with a story in The Sun today that says Sarah Ferguson is being lined up for a TV documentary now that she's returned to Britain. I'll hold my hands up, Charlotte. I didn't even know that she'd left.
No, she's been gone for 7 months. She's been completely missing in action.
Good heavens.
She popped up in an Austrian spa resort at one point, and then it's been widely reported she's been living in Verbier at Paddy McNally's ski chalet. But Paddy McNally sadly died recently. It was his funeral last week, actually, which, interestingly, Sarah Ferguson didn't go to. Her daughter Beatrice went to, as far as I could tell from the pictures. Anyway, side note, she's been having a lovely time, as far as I can tell. Obviously, she's been very upset by what's happening. Sources that spoke to her that I know said that she's been saying things like, I've just been having a quiet time to reflect on my life and my goals, and kind of a little bit kind of speaking this sort of slightly victim narrative. But essentially, it's not too bad living at Paddy McNally's ski chalet in Verbier and an Austrian spa for 7 months. But now she's got to face the music. But interestingly, she's moving into a £10,000 a month house, which really surprises me because I don't know where she's getting her money from, and I actually think it's bad, PR for her to spend so much money on a house when she should be, essentially like Andrew, slightly going to ground and being a little bit humbled by her experience.
So what's the TV documentary that we think she's being lined up for?
Well, she has had lots of offers for TV, interview, a series. She did one in 2011 called Finding Sarah, from royalty to real life. So I think this one might be something like Finding Sarah.
I'm sorry
from
I
Real
missed
Life.
it. I'm sorry. Of all the documentaries I feel I've missed, that one cuts through.
Watch it, Charlie. No, I think this one should be called From Finding Sarah from Real Life to Total Obscurity. Buried under, a heap of bad publicity. But she does want to take a lot of control, because that one in 2011 was with Oprah Winfrey. This one, she wants to be the lead producer on and the executive producer on, because she wants to control it. She doesn't want to do a live interview or a pre-record where she says the wrong thing, i.e., do a Prince Andrew on Newsnight. And also she gets more money that way, because she has started this company and she's got another chap to lead the company. So her name's not front and center of it, but it's a sort of TV production company, and it's going to be pitching ideas to people like Simon Cowell and others. And one of her ideas was to do Crufts meets X Factor. So what she thinks she'll make money from in the future is selling TV ideas to people, and the first one would be a TV show about herself, made by herself.
Singing Cats and Dogs, it sounds to me, if you combine Crufts with the X Factor. But there we go. Some stories over the summer holidays. The biggest one in town has obviously been the return of Meghan and Harry. Meghan also, it was alleged, lined up for maybe a return to an acting role. How has that gone down, do you think, with journalists, with the public? Can Meghan have a role in the public eye, performing, acting? I mean, it is her job after all, isn't it?
I think some people would actually quite like to see her going back to acting, because everything else she's tried has felt very, to quote her, inauthentic. So she may as well give it a go at doing what she does best, which is acting. And in terms of The Gentleman, which is this series for Netflix with Guy Ritchie that she was rumoured to be part of, it was a very odd situation, because it was briefed out by Tina Brown, who really knows her stuff when it comes to these things. And then the very next day, by the same journalist, by Tina Brown, Vanity Fair editor, ex-Vanity Fair editor, she retracted it. Now, you don't often see journalists sort of publicly retracting their own stories. So something must have gone down overnight. They're saying it was all the bad publicity. But actually, when it was revealed she was going to be on The Gentleman, the publicity wasn't particularly negative. There was a bit of publicity around it, but, it had only been running for a day, so there hadn't been much time anyway. So I think Guy Ritchie must have pulled the plug, or maybe she pulled the plug, or maybe, which is quite likely for Meghan, she'd had one meeting with Guy, or one casual phone conversation, and then she'd escalated it and pushed out this kind of narrative that she was going to be in his next series. Because this is her MO. She often will take something that's sort of half-baked, let it leak out, and then out of embarrassment, the person involved actually kind of has to make it come true. And this is a classic PR tactic, actually, and one that the Sussex squad employs all the time.
I mean, there was also, to counter that, there was a lot of people that said that actually she's going to be here, obviously, because her kids are going to be going to British schools, but she'll be flying back and forth to LA to still manage the charity, to still manage all of her other projects that she's got on the go, such as more things with Netflix that are still in the pipeline. So we might not see as much of her as we think that we might.
Yes, somebody said to me this week, imagine if the shoe was on the other foot and we were reporting that Meghan was going to be based in the UK with her children, and that Harry would mostly be in Montecito and would fly back and forth. In that scenario, you'd think, well, hold a minute, this sounds like a separation to me. But for some reason, we're not really interpreting it as such. But I do think it's highly unusual that her own sort of squad are briefing out that she's going to be back to Montecito for 2 weeks at a time, mostly in the US, kind of going back and forth, while Harry remains steadfastly in the UK. That is quite an unusual scenario. So I do feel there's something else going on behind the scenes. I have to say, I don't know what it is, but there's something they're not telling us yet, and I'm sure we'll find out in due course.
What is the future of the relationship between Prince Harry and Prince William, do you think? Because next year is also, again, maybe part of the reason why they're back in the UK is the 30th anniversary of the passing and the death of Princess Diana, their mum. Are they going to be able to patch things up, do you think, before the whole media attention, the media circus that will obviously inevitably focus on that event?
I have to say I don't think so. Initially, I did hope for a rapprochement, but I heard last week that Harry's still very angry and is still in the same... I've written about this in the Mail on Sunday today, actually. He's still in the same mindset as he was in 2020. Apparently, he touched down in the UK, and I think friends were trying to have a catch-up with him and see how he was, and we're expecting this kind of contrite new Harry, sort of cap in hand, apologising and realising the error of his ways, and he's come back the prodigal son. But actually, I think that might be a sort of media narrative that's slightly emerged and is not actually based in reality. It sounds like he's still angry. He's still in no mood to make up with William. He still is hoping for apologies, frustrated by the men in grey suits. We know, because there's a big piece in, I think it's the Times today, that the security issue he's absolutely still furious about. He feels that the UK police were dishonest with him about a threat on his life. So anyway, he's come back a ball of fury and anger and not really in a mood to make up with his brother, from what I gather.
Yes, and you say security is still an issue that I think plagues Prince Harry. Is he going to get that protection that he wants at the taxpayers' expense, those armed guards protecting him and his family 24 hours a day? Let's see. The committee that looks into all of that, Revik, I think is good to see. Well, they've got to come to a conclusion one way or another, haven't they?
Yeah, they certainly do. And, you know, I'm sure that they were not displeased with the story today about how Al-Qaeda tried to, or claim they wanted to assassinate him. Because, of course, that does remind the general public that these threats are not just paranoia. There is actually some credible threats out there. And so they do need to make a decision. And, you know, it would not, of course, be a very good thing for the country, no matter how much you'd like or dislike Harry, if something happened to Princess Diana's younger son. So somebody's got to make a decision somewhere along the line. And I'm sure coming back to the UK would expedite that decision, and it's possibly partly why he's one of the many reasons why he's come back.
Charlotte Griffiths, editor-at-large on the Mail on Sunday. Thank you so much for joining me on this Bank Holiday Sunday. After the break, we'll be taking all of your calls and messages, and we'll also be going through the top stories with Ben Habib, chairman of the Great British PAC. We'll also be talking to David Wooding, former newspaper editor who knows everything that's going on in Whitehall. Should the right unite to stop a left-wing coalition? What are the biggest issues Burnham needs to tackle at BMQs? Those are the two questions we're asking this morning. Let me know your views. This is Charlie Rowley, sitting in for Mark Dolan on Weekend Breakfast, the home of common sense. This is Talk.
The Californian cash machine is out.
The ATM, the American ATM.
The American ATM has run out of dollar bills. And I think we really need to look at why they have done it and why now, because in my mind is very hasty.
This is breaking news. Meghan Markle is in talks, apparently, to return to acting with a role in Guy Ritchie's Netflix series, The Gentleman. But that would be pretty embarrassing for her, wouldn't it? Pretty humiliating.
I think it's undignified if you marry into the royal family. If you're in entertainment or something like that, actually, I think it's a very undignified thing, and I don't think that you should do it.
I think it's about money, and I think it's about position. I think it's sad that they're using, in a way, the children in this respect, because if this is not permanent, you shouldn't be moving kids out of schools at 5 and 7. You've got to act a bit more responsibly than that. So it looks like if they are enrolling them in the schools, it can't have happened on Sunday. It can't have been, these things, you can be Mick Jagger. You can't just ring up a school and say, I want to take my kids are joining you on such and such a date. There are procedures to enroll.
I think the kids are the answer to the whole thing. You're absolutely right, Julia. They're looking at the future. They're, as someone rather savagely described them, they're now middle-aged and not very interesting anymore. So
God, if they're middle-aged, what the hell how the hell are we still surviving?
Does anybody actually care? Does anybody... Am I the only... I do not care about Meghan and Harry. I do not care at all. Not a gnat's backside, do I? Not at all. I don't care about Meghan and... I do not care about Meghan and Harry. If they walked in this room, I'd say, get out! I don't care about Meghan and Harry. Can I put that any more emphatically? I do not care. I love Angela Levin, but I don't care about Meghan and Harry, all right? It doesn't keep me awake at night. I don't wake up in the morning going, I wonder what Megs is up to. Never, ever does it cross my mind. I don't give a hoot about Meghan and Harry. Also this afternoon, Meghan and Harry have arrived in the... No, we're not going to do that, OK? I promise you. Have we made that clear?
across the UK. On DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
Super grip stories here at the home of common sense. This is Talk with me, Charlie Rowley, sitting in for the legend that is Mark Dolan, enjoying still a beautiful bank holiday weekend, I imagine, whilst he's still on holiday. He'll be back next week, I've no doubt. You have been in touch with all of the answers that we've been searching for this morning. The two questions we're asking: should the right unite to stop a left-wing coalition? You've been telling us what you think very, very clearly about that. 0344 499 1000 is the number to have your say. Should the right unite to stop a left-wing coalition? We've also been asking the question this morning: what are the biggest issues Burnham needs to tackle at PMQs? The Prime Minister returns, along with all of his MP colleagues, next week to Parliament. For the first time, he'll be at the dispatch box as the Prime Minister, taking on Kemi Badenoch, Leader of the Opposition for the Conservative Party. He'll be taking on Nigel Farage for Reform, and Ed Davey. No, me neither. 0344 499 1000, or text the word TALK to 87222. We've got a few texts here already. Good morning, Charlie. I think people need to grasp that should there be an early general election, no way are Reform ready for government. Well, that's no name attached to that text, but let me know if you think that's the case. Are Reform ready for government? They've got their conference in Birmingham next week. They'll be setting out what they would do if they formed a government for the first 100 days. That'll be interesting to see. And then we've got the conference season right round the corner. The Conservatives will be making their pitch also, as will the Labour Party, as will all the others. But a texter there that says that Reform are not ready in the slightest. Carl says Rupert should stand down for the good of the nation. That's Rupert Lowe, leader of Restore, where it now seems evident enough that when you see local elections taking place, particularly by-elections that we've had in the last week or so, standing a Restore Party candidate has deprived Reform a chance of holding on to that seat or even winning seats. We had a situation in Dover where Reform were clearly, by about 27 points, leading when it came to fielding a right-wing candidate or a centre-right-wing candidate. The Greens were able to pip that Reform candidate to the post because of the Restore Party candidate that was also on the ballot. So that is why we're asking the question: should the right unite to stop a left-wing coalition? That is the question. 0344 499 1000. I'm delighted to say someone who might be able to answer that question and all the other top stories that we're talking about this morning is Ben Habib, chairman of the Great British PAC, who joins me now, who has experience in some of these political parties that we're talking about that might need to unite as a right-wing coalition to stop the left forming a government. Good morning to you, Ben. Thank you for joining me this morning.
Charlie. Morning, good to see you.
Good to see you. Just head on, tackle that question for me. You know, does the right need to unite to stop a Burnham government or a coalition of the left?
So there are a number of presumptions behind the question, and I think the biggest presumption is that there is a sort of unified theory of what it means to be right-wing. And I think part of the problem at the moment, and the reason you've got a fractured so-called right-wing, is because there isn't a unified theory. Many people think the Conservatives should never be trusted again because they had 14 years in government and failed to do anything conservative. Many people think Reform can't be trusted because it pivots one way and the other way, and it's anti-mass deportation of illegal migrants, and the next day it is pro-it, excludes women and children. 1 minute it wants to remove the cap onto child benefit. The next minute it wants to reduce the welfare state. And so people look at what's going on, and I think there's a big sort of disquiet, a big debate taking place about what it actually means to be right-wing. And unless and until that debate is settled, unless you have a sort of coherent political philosophy emerging on the so-called right, you won't really be able to get the unity we're looking for. Of course, we need a unified right wing, but more crucially, we need to understand what it is that we on the right wish to do, what we believe in, what we stand for, what we wish to do, and how we're going to do it. If we could collectively have that debate, if the leaders of the various parties on the right could get together, have that debate honestly behind closed doors, settle on a unified vision of where this country needs to go, then the right would automatically unite. The reason we can't do it is because none of the three parties really has had the courage to sit down with the others and get to that unified position. Well, that's what's required.
We know on a couple of issues what they all stand for, which is, I think, all three would say they've got to leave the ECHR. Certainly the Conservative Party have said that, as have Reform. I'm not too sure of what Restore stand for, but I'm pretty sure that they would go forward with that motion as well. They want to deport, all three of them want to deport foreign criminals, they want to stop the small boats crisis, they want to cut taxes, they want lower regulation, they want to reform welfare to fund our defences. These are all issues that people on the right are united behind.
But they're not. If you scratch below the surface of that, Charlie, they haven't got a unified view. Let's take the ECHR, for example. To ditch the ECHR basically means you've got to repudiate the Trade and Cooperation Agreement with the European Union, which requires us to stay committed to the ECHR, even though the ECHR's got nothing to do with the EU. It's in that treaty. If you want to cut benefits for foreigners, you've got to repudiate the Withdrawal Agreement, which gives half of the 1.5 million people in this country who are actually getting benefits, so European Union citizens. You've got to get rid of their right to have it, which means getting rid of the Withdrawal Agreement. I haven't seen anyone on the right-hand side of British politics talking bravely about what needs to be done to deliver just leaving the ECHR. They all talk about the ECHR. None of them have thought about the ramifications of doing it. Even Restore Britain. Rupert Lowe habitually trumpets his 200-page mass deportation policy. If you go through the detail of that deportation policy, it tries very hard to avoid terminating the Trade and Cooperation Agreement and Withdrawal Agreement with the European Union. Now, that might seem like an esoteric debate to be having so many years after we've left the EU. But the point is, unless the right recognizes that there are very significant changes that we would need to make to our arrangements with the EU and indeed constitutionally within the United Kingdom, unless it comes to that realization, is prepared to articulate that realization and set out what the ramifications are, there'll be nothing other than rhetoric about, we want to leave the ECHR. That's all well and good, but how are you going to deal with the EU when you've terminated the Withdrawal Agreement and they launch a trade war? How are you going to respond to that inevitability? You want to ditch net zero? You've got to ditch the Trade and Cooperation Agreement. There's so much that they say on the right, but they don't actually understand what the ramifications are, what it means. They have to have a holistic, coherent set of policies that come together. They haven't got it. Kemi hasn't got it. Rupert Lowe hasn't got it. And Nigel Farage hasn't got it.
But even if they disagree in some of the detail in achieving all of the things that you were just talking about, is it not the case that we're trying to now make the perfect the enemy of the good? It is good enough just to have people that agree with the principles, rather, because otherwise you're going to end up, otherwise there's going to be, all the parties will be split. You'll be seeing, like we saw in Dover, where Restore fielding a candidate, which arguably might have taken votes away from Reform and let in a Green candidate to go on and win.
Sure. But if you stop at the simplistic approach that the parties seem to have stopped at, which is, for example, let's just stay on the ECHR, leave the ECHR, then you get into office and you suddenly realize you can't do it because there are multiple ramifications for your attempting to do it, and you haven't thought those through, you haven't got the support of the British people to do it, you will fail. And the last thing this country needs is another kind of Boris Johnson government, which sets out to do something and actually does completely the opposite. He said he was going to bring in a points-based immigration system. Actually, we got the Boris wave of mass immigration. He said he was going to leave the EU. We got the Withdrawal Agreement and the Trade and Cooperation Agreement, which prevent us from buying British goods first, which prevent us from ditching net zero, which again, the main parties talk about ditching net zero. They can't do it. They talk about deregulating the economy. They can't do it because we're stuck in EU competition rules and we're stuck with EU employment regulations and so on and so forth. There has to be a grown-up set of debates taking place on the right, out of which emerge a philosophy of an agenda, a business plan that will deliver this country to safety. And then everything else, Charlie, falls into place. It's not the perfect becoming the enemy of the possible. It's politicians reacting to the 24-hour news cycle, giving succor to their support bases, and failing to do the proper thinking and heavy lifting that this country desperately needs to save it. That's what they need to be getting on with. Stop with all the performing, razzmadazzle, chuck this policy out, bit of red meat for people who want to deport people. Focus on the real issues, get a grip of them, come to a unified understanding of what's needed, and then everything else falls into place.
But one of those issues, let's say, is the death penalty. So, Restore, whether it was performative or not, but under Rupert Lowe, he kind of held out an olive branch to Nigel over the summer and said, look, actually, why don't we do a deal? Come on, let's be grown up after all the difficulties that they've had, whether it's personal, whether it's political. But, even Rupert sort of was nodding to the fact that he knows that actually a united right would probably be better than a left-wing coalition. But one of those policies that he wanted Reform to sign up to, if they were ever going to do a deal, was on the death penalty. Now, that seemed to me very far-fetched. That's not an issue that many people are talking about. So, but that's a failure of, I would argue, Rupert Lowe as a political leader, understanding actually, the public aren't in that space, or they don't want to talk about that. They still want to talk about the issues like the cost of living, like migration, like crime, like the NHS. But the idea that, Reform would agree to that element, then that means the deal's off.
No,
sure. Actually that's not how they should be working together. That's not how you
Charlie,
do business.
I mean, I think what you've done is just evidence my point. Rupert Lowe, when he made that ostensible offer to Reform to merge or come together in some way, cooperate in some way, he started with 5 prerequisites, none of which that I could see were related to each other or coherent in their collective exposition. And one of them, as you rightly say, was bringing back the death penalty. In amongst the demands that he made, he didn't once say that before the death penalty were to be brought back, we would need to reform our criminal justice system. Can you imagine now if the Labour Party brought back the death penalty, what that would do for this country? It would be an utter disaster. Bringing back the death penalty as a policy is precisely the kind of thing I'm talking about. It's red meat to people who want justice. It's red meat to people who think that our criminal justice system has failed. But actually bringing it back right now would be an utter disaster for this country because it would be misapplied. And what Rupert Lowe should have done, if he was genuine about coming together with Farage, is say, look, Nigel, let's sit in a room. Let's get Kemi in the same room. Let's discuss what we need to do to make sure that eventually our criminal justice system begins to work. The death penalty is like a minute part of what may or may not be required in order to make the criminal justice system work. Are you with me?
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. But the question I suppose I've got in my mind is who instigates those conversations? Restore are not in any polling position to start offering things or suggesting things or demanding things. I could argue it's Nigel Farage who, out of the 3 parties on the right, he is ahead in the polls. And a poll out today in the Express newspaper says that it's a huge boost for Nigel Farage, as mega poll shows that Reform would win most seats at an election. So if there's going to be a deal done, even if it's behind closed doors, to have a bit of a nod and wink and say, right, okay, I know actually in Reform territory, we might not be able to win these seats, so we'll put up a candidate, but we're not going to campaign very hard. But at the end of the day, he's the one that should be calling the shots and calling these discussions, shouldn't he?
Well, every one of those 3 people basically hold the keys collectively to what you and I might regard as a right-wing government at the next election. Lowe can deny Reform seats, and the Conservatives can deny each of the other seats, and so on. Lowe, on his own, Restore is not going to achieve anything other than damage to Reform, principally to Reform, because the Conservative voter base is very different. But through the potential for damage, what Lowe should be doing is trying to get Farage to a position where you have this unified way of thinking. We all jump to what's required to electorally deliver a result for the right wing. We're not debating, we're not analysing what needs to be done in order to make sure that we get a genuinely coherent right-wing government that can deliver for this country. We're not focusing on that. We're all talking about electoral mathematics and failing to understand there's something much more fundamentally important that first needs to be addressed. I know I'm banging on about it, Charlie, and everyone wants to talk about electoral maths, and perhaps we can just do that now if there's still time.
Well,
yeah.
Well, stay with me, Ben, because I've got a text here from Roger that says, first of all, Charlie, Ben Habib needs to be advising all the right-wing parties at a special conference. So there you are. You've got a fan there, Roger. But we've also got Alan on the line. So stick with us, Ben. Let's have a conversation with Alan, who's called up. Hi, Alan. From Skelton. Is that where you're from?
Close enough. Yeah. I was just listening to Ben there, and I've listened to him before, and I know his heart's in the right place, but he wants perfection. He wants every I dotted and T crossed before you get elected. He thinks that's the only way they can do it, but they need to get in first. They need to try. They need to get the people in place so they can have a go at doing this stuff that Reform want to do. It's no good trying to make everything perfect beforehand. That just won't get them elected.
So, Alan, do you think, before I throw back to Ben to answer that, do you think there should be an election, for example, where all parties can stand, and even if there is some sort of agreement behind closed doors or a bit of a nod and wink that I was just talking about, have the election, see where the numbers lie, and then it may be the only choice then that they've got to work together when you see the arithmetic. Is that your view, or do you want them to try and have a deal before, just maybe not to the same level as what Ben's talking about?
I don't think you can ever achieve a deal on paper before the election, because there's too many people in Restore that are too extreme for the people in the Conservatives and the Reform Party. There's too many people in Reform that are too not left-wing, centrist for people in Restore. You can't please everybody all the time. There's some things that Nigel proposes that I don't particularly agree with, but I would back him to the hilt for what he's done over the past 20 years and what I think he will try to do if Reform can get in.
Ben, what do you make of what Alan's been saying?
So just a couple of things. I think, again, Alan, if you don't mind me saying so, you're desirous, and I am desirous, that we actually get the right people into office, and that having got into office, they do the right thing. It's not a matter of me wishing to dot every I and cross every T. I think I'm saying something much more fundamental than that. The depth of thinking that's taken place so far on the right-hand side of British politics is so shallow that actually, even if we were somehow to win a majority at the next election, what would happen is that the government that forms would fall flat on its face because it hasn't thought this through. Actually, this country is in such peril, Alan, that when you walk into that, when the new right-wing Prime Minister walks into Parliament on that first day of his new government, he has to be able to go to the dispatch box and bang down all the fundamental constitutional and international changes that this country needs, and have the mandate of the British people to deliver those if this country is to stand a chance of actually mending itself, securing itself, becoming sovereign again, becoming prosperous and secure again. The work required is titanic. It's not good enough to be a good campaigner and to say what people want to hear. You actually have to go in and you have to deliver. Otherwise, you will be nobbled and this country will be down the drain yet again.
Alan, final word to you on this. What do you make of that? Is that not the sensible approach that Ben was just talking about?
I understand what he's saying, but I just don't think we have the time. I don't think we have the opportunities to get everything sorted out in advance. People need to take a leap of faith, vote Reform, even Restore and Tories, and get them in, give them a chance to at least try to do something, because otherwise we're doomed.
Well, there we go. That's Alan's. Thank you, Alan. Thanks so much for calling me this morning. That's Alan's view. Ben, Habib, pleasure as always. Thank you so much for joining me for that fascinating conversation. I'm sure this won't be the last time that commentators and presenters want to have this kind of conversation. That was Ben Habib there, chairman of the Great British PAC. Let me know your thoughts. Should the right unite to stop a left-wing coalition? And what are the biggest issues that Burnham needs to tackle as he gets up at the dispatch box to face his first PMQs next week and beyond? 0344 499 1000. We'll be taking all of your calls a little bit later on. This is Charlie Rowley, sitting in for Mark Dolan. This is Talk.
Scariest moment, not that I want to admit it, but where was it? Was it in the middle of the night when somebody was by your tent? What was it that you thought, my God, I'm in trouble here?
To be honest, it was the moment where I'd been stopped. I'm running down to the beach. I'm trying to get to the water. You're so tired, and I get down to the bottom of the dunes. Next thing you know, bang. 6 coppers stop me and this other lad, and I'm thinking, surely not. Surely not. They never stop any of the migrants. How all of a sudden have I run down to the beach and the 6 coppers are?
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
0344 499 1000. That's the number to call to have your say on the questions we're asking this morning. Should the right unite to stop a left-wing coalition? And what are the biggest issues Burnham needs to tackle at PMQs? You can text the word TALK to 87222 or follow us and send us a message on X. Just go to @talktv, followed by your message, and we'll get as many read out as we possibly can and get your voice on the airwaves, like Alan a second ago, who was talking to Ben Habib. Ben thinks that actually all the party leaders on the right, the Conservatives, Reform and Restore, that's Kemi Badenoch, Nigel Farage, Rupert Lowe, they should all get behind closed doors. They should do a deal. They should dot the I's and cross the T's. Before they go to the electorate, so they've got a fully formulated plan, agenda and manifesto that the country can get behind. Not so, says Alan. He thought that actually, no, that's a bit too much detail. They should just be allowed to stand, run as candidates for their individual parties, but then work something out afterwards. Don't make the perfect, I should say, the enemy of the good. Well, a man who knows everything about what's going on in Whitehall and Westminster, who will be able to dissect this and more of the stories, political stories that we've got in our today's national newspapers. David Wooding, former newspaper editor and fan and friend of the show, joins me now.
Morning, Charlie.
Happy Sunday. Happy bank holiday.
Yeah.
What do you make of it, all this question? It feels as though some people are saying, and they've been very sure of it, that a general election is coming. It seems to be on the cards. If Burnham maintains his popularity, he's been giving away all the sweets over the summer holidays. He's now sort of going to have a new approach to PMQs, no notes, so try to be a bit more informal. Is there going to be an early general election? And if so, should the right unite to stop what could be another left-wing government or a left-wing coalition?
Well, Andy Burnham has said there is not going to be an early election. But when he says that, I think he means within the next few months, because he's not really answered the question, will there be an election before 2029, which is the last available date. I think he could go in the spring. He could even go in October. But spring probably more likely. And in fact, next year. Yeah. And Kemi Badenoch has in fact asked the Cabinet Secretary, Antonia de Romeo, to allow her access talks with the civil service ahead of an election. So she's taking it seriously. So yes, he might go because he's at his most popular now, and the going is going to get tough. He's got massive problems with the economy, the boats, everything else, and his popularity is going to start sinking fast. It is going to happen, however good he is. So he may well go. Now, the problem for the right is, like the Lib Dems and the Labour have split each other in the past because of parties of the left, there are now three parties on the right, and they're terribly split. And the antipathy they hold towards each other. Nigel Farage does not like the Conservative Party because he's had problems with them in the past. Restore do not like Farage. I mean, so how you get them to do a deal is very difficult to work out. But necessity might be the mother of invention on this one, because there's a case in the south of Kent, Guston, Kingston, Kingstown and St Margaret's on the Cliff, I think it's called.
It's where the by-elections,
where the by-elections were, a local by-election. The Greens got in there, and they only got 28% of the vote. Reform got 27%. The Tories got something like 17%, and Restore got 11%. Add all that together, you've got 55%, so you would have had a party of the right. And that picture, if it's rolled out across Britain, means that we could end up with a Labour government.
I mean, we had Ben Habib on just before your good self, who was saying that he thinks actually the party leaders, they should put aside all their differences, they should get behind closed doors, they should actually set out their plans together. They should make a deal, make a document, and then go to the country as a united front. I mean, I take personally a slightly different view. I imagine I suppose the question is, should there be a sort of slight nod and a wink to the other party leaders to say, right, OK, if you're a Conservative candidate and you've got a better chance in the southeast or the shires, the home counties, whereas Reform might have a better chance in the Birminghams and the Midlands and the north of England, that old red wall. We might all field candidates, but we might have to accept that, at the back of the general election, we might have to work together, either in a coalition ourselves or supplying confidence or whatever whatever the outcome is. Should there just be a nod and a wink to say, but we're not going to campaign too hard in the areas we might think you might do a bit better?
Well, you'd think they would be doing that behind the scenes, because obviously in a case where Reform going neck and neck with Labour, and the Conservatives have got no chance in one of these northern constituencies, if the Conservatives are getting 10% of the vote, that could stop Reform winning that seat, and Reform could prop up a Conservative coalition government in the future. So they really are going to have to think hard and fast about this, because that's the only way, as the polls stand at the moment, that they're going to be able to beat Labour.
Well, talking of the polls, obviously Andy Burnham is sort of ahead in some, is still quite neck and neck with Reform, but, Reform on about 22, 23%, the Tories on maybe 21, 20, 22. There's not that much between them all. So the second question we're asking today is, what has Andy Burnham got to do, to tackle the big issues, and what are the biggest issues, that the country needs tackling in order to maintain that Burnham bounce, if he is going to go to the polls, to keep him in number 10?
Well, the Burnham bounce has all been built on hope and personality and vibes, happiness.
That word vibes, it is a vibes government, yes.
It is. It's vacuous vibes, some may say. But nevertheless, he has made people feel a little bit better about the future. And he's a more likeable, charismatic character than Keir Starmer. So this managerial, technocratic style we had with Keir Starmer has gone. And we have somebody who's going there, having a pint in the pub and eating a packet of scampi fries and talking on TikTok. Now, a lot of people are saying that that's wearing a bit thin, but it has immediately given a feeling of, oh, we've got a real person in charge here. And I think he's done well. He's announced about 3 or 4 easy policies, don't cost a lot of money, are in the right direction, cheap, quick results, made people feel a little bit positive about themselves. But it's not going to get any better. He still has to tackle the boats. And we've had thousands, 2,000 people landing by boat. Has it gone up to 3,000 now since Andy Burnham became Prime Minister? The economy is not doing any better. I mean, we've got this, the business with defence as well. The Chancellor resigned as Defence Secretary only 11 weeks ago because the Treasury was unwilling to stump up the 3% of GDP by 2030. Now we hear that he's not going to do it either.
Yes.
So he's got a lot of these problems on his hands to fix, and that's what he's got to do to get in. And that's why I think he might go early, because that lead he has is only going to be eaten away at as time goes on, and we see that the insurmountable problems that he faces are not being dealt with as adequately as the public want.
Yes, yeah. I mean, I suppose the going early will mean that you would lose a number of colleagues. I mean, he has got a huge majority, so I mean, you might just somebody around his table might just say, well, actually, stick with it, Prime Minister. You've got a couple of years here to go. You've got a big majority. Do as much as you can. All the good stuff. Give away all the sweets. Although, again, that would beg the question, if you're giving away all these sweets, because you've then got to, and to do that, you've got to increase taxes, a mandate that he doesn't have, because his hands are slightly tied by the last manifesto that Labour put forward. That would then prompt the argument, well, you've got to have a general election. But, does he just hang on with that big majority until, he really needs to, which is the last possible moment?
Well, I mean, the other issue on that, Charlie, is the backbench MPs. A lot of them won't want him to go because they face losing their seats. And he'll have to deal with that. On the other hand, having a small majority might be in his... to his advantage, because as we saw with Keir Starmer, he's got a big majority there, but there's a lot of rebels on the backbenches. If a lot of them were to go and things were tight and he could have a smaller group and control them better, then maybe that would work in his favour a bit more.
Well, you're absolutely right. Can he control them? Is it in his hands at all? I mean, we're talking as if he is the Messiah. I mean, he's had a great 6 weeks of just being able to flood the media landscape, giving away all these sweets to us one way or another, avoiding media scrutiny, certainly avoiding parliamentary scrutiny, because we've had the summer, but that all changes from next week. So he really will be tested. And when it comes to those big issues like dealing with welfare, dealing with the small boats crossings, dealing with the economy, dealing with the NHS, dealing with all things that people care about, can he really deliver? Let me know what you think. 0344 499 1000. We'll be taking your calls with David after this break. Stay tuned. This is Talk.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
Your calls have been coming in thick and fast on the two questions we're asking this morning. We've got Andrew on the line. Hello, Andrew.
Hello there, how are you?
Very good. Happy Bank Holiday Sunday to you, my friend.
Look, all's good. You've got a good show this morning.
Thank you very much. Well, it's only as good as the team that I've got with me, and I've got David in the studio, who's a brilliant contributor, and Dean's not too bad himself, our executive producer today. So thank you very much.
So if you think about it, if Dean had come into that environment and you weren't going to broadcast what he wanted and he decided to wreck the show, that wouldn't be good. So if you look at the landscape, the political landscape at the moment, you've got three parties on the right, and they've decided that they can't work together. And that isn't British. British people are about compromise to a common purpose to move things forward. Now, I don't particularly like Peter Tatchell, the what we used to call the gay campaigner. But if I was Prime Minister, he'd be the first person that I gave a knightage or a peerage, because he was brave enough to go to Paris and try and arrest Mugabe, and he got nearly beaten to death by his bodyguards. So I compromise in my views. They have to compromise because the goal is the well-being of every man, woman and child in the country. Now, if you can't do that, then I'm not going to vote for any of them.
So how do they compromise, though, Andrew? Is it by doing a deal before the general election, or sort of a quick nod and a wink to say, right, we know you would poll better in these parts of the country, so we're going to put up a candidate, but not campaign overly hard. So, you know, kind of give your opponent a free run, knowing that you might have to work with them after the election. Is it do you want to see them all signed up to a manifesto themselves, or something slightly looser that they have to work out after the general election?
No, what the option, if it was me, I'd put them in a room and say, right, you have to set a vision that you can deliver against on day one for the people of this country that they will believe. So that's what you have to do. You have to come together and say, right, we're going to work together because on day one, we're going to withdraw from the European Court of Human Rights. We're going to withdraw the ambassador from Albania, Pakistan and Tehran. And we're going to stop all flights and visas from those countries, and the only flights going out will be the flights taking people back. And we're going to do that day one. And if you set out a vision like that, that is believable, and then the polling will be, do you believe they will do this? That is the way forward. What you can't do is live in this wonderful world where there was a local election and I got 9% of the vote, and I kept out that vile, evil Kemi Badenoch or that vile, evil Rupert Lowe or Nigel Farage. That's pathetic. That is pathetic. That's like taking a toy and smashing it so someone can't play with it.
But that's currently where we are, isn't it, Andrew? That's kind of the hostility, it seems, on a personal level at least, between, or animosity between Rupert Lowe and Nigel Farage, and between Nigel Farage and Kemi Badenoch and vice versa. It is that kind of thought process, isn't it, where they do want to keep each other out.
And brilliant. And who wins? The country loses. Women in that little village that have got 1,500 asylum seekers turning up there, or illegal migrants.
Whittington, I think, yep.
Yeah, they're going to lose. And look what Burnham's doing. He's sending £5 million to Nepal, but what's he sent to Piddington? Nothing. And if they don't compromise and paint a vision for this country and deliver against it, we are going to have the end of Britain and British people finished.
Andrew from Hertfordshire, thank you so much for your call. We'll also go to Mike, who is on the line, I believe, in Portugal. Good morning to you, Mike.
Good morning, Charlie.
What would you like to say about uniting the right? Should that be something that all three party leaders, Kemi Badenoch, Nigel Farage and Rupert Lowe, should they unite? Should they sign a document that they're all signed up to before a general election, or should they just wait until after a general election? Should they all, set out their own stall, wait until they see what the public have to say about their policies and see who gets elected before any kind of deal is discussed?
I think politicians ought to take a lesson from the private sector. In the good old days, companies used to have a mission statement. It could be a disparate company, they'll have a mission statement. Couple of sentences, it gets to the essence of what they are. The right wing need it. I'd love to know what the mission statement for Labour is, because I think it would be the state running everything. You need a mission statement. If they could be persuaded to go that route, I think we'd all know a little bit more and could achieve what we want to achieve.
I'm going to bring Mike Wooding back in on this, who has a former national newspaper editor, and of course across everything in politics and Whitehall. I know you've been there for many years. What do you make of those two calls that we've had so far, just about the way in which a mission statement should be set up? Because it seems to me that those parties, the parties on the right, they do all agree on some of the big ticket items, cutting welfare, cutting migration, stopping the small boats, cutting taxes, do they need a mission statement? Would that be helpful, or would it be detrimental?
Well, it might be. I mean, Andrew and Mike speak a lot of sense on this, because broadly those three parties are in the same ballpark. They both want to stop the boats, leave the ECHR. They say both. They all. There's three of them. All want to leave this convention, and they all want to crack down on welfare dependency, and all think the common sense things that Andrew and Mike have talked about. But there's one or two little areas, for instance, bringing back the death penalty and things like that, where there's perhaps a bit of disagreement. So what they need to do is look what they have in common, which is they have more in common than they're opposed to, and then work out what they do with those fringe items. But that means they've got to sit all of these three people around a table, and Rupert Lowe, Nigel Farage and Kemi Badenoch. Would you like to be at that dinner party, Charlie?
to be a fly on the wall for those conversations. Yeah, I mean, it would be brilliant, wouldn't it? Be an exclusive. Thank you so much, Mike, there from Portugal. Brilliant part of the world, although it's not too bad. Although it was actually, the weather looked quite nice this morning. It's clouded over a bit here now in Talk Towers. Thank you so much for your calls there. Before I let you go, Mike Wooding, who's still here in the David Wooding, sorry, still in the studio. I want to ask you about James Cleverly, who you may know. You might have interviewed him. You've spoken to him many times. He's putting himself forward to be the Tory candidate for Mayor of London. Yeah,
a very attractive candidate for the Mayor of London. He was brought up in South London, I believe, although he's an Essex MP. A bit of a blow to Kemi Badenoch. He's the Shadow Housing Secretary. Could have had a step up in the reshuffle, which we're told may be coming round very soon. But nevertheless, he's probably looked at his constituency and feel he's under threat there from reform. Again, another reason for uniting the right. And so maybe he wants to take his chance on taking on Sadiq Khan. He'd make a good mayor, I would think. He's a sensible, proper Tory with lots of gravitas and a good personality, a likeable chap. So he could do well.
Yeah, I mean, there was a poll I think I saw out a couple of weeks ago where most Londoners, I think it was an Evening Standard poll, so London, it used to be a London Rag, it's now online, but, you know, the polling came out and said that most people wouldn't want Sadiq Khan to run for a historic fourth term. Now, he might want to do that because it's historic, but he is in the House of Lords now, so some people might think, you know, you've got too many jobs going on. But if it's the case that it is Sadiq Khan versus James Cleverly versus Leila Cunningham, so those are the three candidates that we know about so far. I mean, obviously James Cleverly's got to be selected, but he seems to be he is the front runner, and will certainly be now. I mean, how do you see that playing out? Would that be a situation you can see whereby Reform and the Tory party vote is split in London and allows Sadiq Khan, maybe, if most Londoners don't want him, but to go on and win a fourth term?
Again, that is the same problem in a regional setting, really, because they're all every time this happens, they're undermining each other's popularity. There are obviously there's some people who go to Reform who wouldn't go to the Conservatives from Labour voters. We've seen that in the north of England. So she's taking stuff, Leila will be taking votes away from Sadiq Khan in some way, but also she will be taking votes away from the Conservative, which is the problem. So this is it. Everything is splintered. It's fractured into so many different elements that it's really hard for anybody to get onto that level where they win because of it.
I think you're absolutely right, and this is why I think people are asking themselves, you know, should there be an early general election? And should the right unite to prevent any other candidates sort of slipping through the net or by default just, you know, appearing when they really had no real chance to begin with, but because of the way in which the votes share would be so scattergun, it could cause all kinds of political. I mean, good for journalists.
Yeah, no,
keeps us talking.
It's great for news. I'd said in the past that they may be forced to do a deal after an election when they look at the makeup of the House of Commons, for instance, and see that if the Conservatives and the Reform join forces, they can form a coalition and form a right-wing government. But it may be that they don't get a chance to do that unless they unite before, because if they don't win enough seats, if Labour get an outright majority, then there's no chance of doing a deal afterwards.
Yeah, and I suppose my final question, I mean, we touched on it earlier on just briefly, that, you know, Kemi Badenoch has written to the Cabinet Secretary to say that she wants access talks with the civil service, so they would be prepared to implement Tory party policies should they win the general election. I mean, is this sort of just posturing ahead of the conference season? Is this sort of trying to get out the traps early to shore up her troops? Or is this something, do you mean, could the Tories genuinely be the next government? Could Kemi Badenoch be the next Prime Minister?
Well, it's possible. It's possible. It's possible also Nigel Farage could be the next Prime Minister. But I think what she's trying to do here is to force Andy Burnham's hand, is to get talk about an election going. So once you get the stories appearing in the press and on television and radio, people start coming out and telling us more about what Andy's intentions are. So we'll find out. But yeah, there's a little bit of sneakiness going on there, but I don't blame her for that.
What would the world be like if there wasn't a bit of, you know, political, you know, jostling and, you know, shenanigans just before they all come back before the parliamentary term kicks off again? David Wooding, thank you so much for joining me this morning on Weekend Breakfast. We'll be taking all of your calls after this break. Stay with us. This is the home of common sense. This is Charlie Rowley sitting in for Mark Dolan. This is Talk.
Scariest moment, not that I want to admit it, but where was it? Was it in the middle of the night when somebody was by your tent? What was it that you thought, my God, I'm in trouble here?
To be honest, it was the moment where I'd been stopped. You know, I'm running down to the beach. I'm trying to get to the water. You know, you're so tired, and I get down to the bottom of the dunes. Next thing you know, bang. 6 coppers stop me and this other lad, and I'm thinking, surely not. You know, surely not. They never stop any of the migrants. How all of a sudden have I run down to the beach and the 6 coppers are...
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
Welcome back to the final part of Talk Breakfast with me, Charlie Rowley, sitting in for Mark Dolan. Your calls have been coming in thick and fast, and we'll be hitting the phone lines in just a second. But there is a message from Tim, which I feel obliged to read out. He says, "Good morning, Talk. I'm not sure if my messages get through, but hopefully they do. Well, they certainly have this morning. Charlie Rowley needs his own permanent spot on Talk. He's brilliant. Really good show this morning. Regards from Tim in Devon." Well, thank you, Tim, for joining me this morning. It's a bit of a marathon on a bank holiday weekend, but we have got through, and we've covered so many topics, asking a lot of questions, but not least of all, should the right unite to stop a left-wing coalition? All of your views have been coming in thick and fast about that. What are the biggest issues Burnham needs to tackle at PMQs? Another topic that has got the phones ringing off the hook, and I am delighted to say we can speak to Malcolm in Cheltenham, who wants to ask me a question, I believe. Well, good morning, Malcolm.
Yes, good morning, Charlie. Thanks for taking my call.
Pleasure.
I'm a big believer in first past the post system. I think it relates me directly as a constituent to my MP. So I'm not interested in any change in first past the post system. However, the quality of our MPs leaves a lot to be desired across the whole parties, and that worries me tremendously. And as an individual, once I elect somebody, I get no say in anything else that happens. Now, I would like us as a country, and I'm sure as a political commentator, you've looked at the Swiss system, where they have what is called a direct democracy system, which allows citizens to express their opinion on decisions made by Parliament and to propose amendments. And they do this up to 4 times a year, where the people aged 18 and over are called on to vote on certain specific issues.
And
people can propose votes on issues themselves to amend legislation.
And is it mandatory voting? So you've got to turn up to vote? Is it sort of...
Well, the average vote in the Swiss elections, the normal elections, is 45%. On these elections, where the people are asked specifically, it is 59%. So there is an important element here. And certainly on things like there are certain issues which there has to be an automatic referendum. So my basic is that I believe that both at local level and at national level, the citizens, yes, we appoint our MPs, but they go in their own sweet way in many respects. They bring in the assistant dime bill back before Parliament. I understand 100 MPs now want to change first past the post system. We're having no say in that.
Yes.
And it's wrong.
I think there are some issues. No, you've in the space of the last 30 seconds, I've flip-flopped about 3 times in my mind during this conversation, which is why it's important to have these conversations. That's why we're the home of common sense, because it does change people's view. My initial view was that, look, I don't think the public are ready for more elections. You know, they elect their MPs to go and actually solve the problems that we all talk about here on this station. But I think there might be, yes, you're absolutely right, I think there might just be a ceiling whereby you have to have a referendum on things like the changing of our voting system. I don't want to see it change. I think first past the post is absolutely right, because I think regardless of the outcome or the turnout, you've got to get over 50%, and it's about people voting for who they want rather than in any kind of proportional representation system. You sort of, you know, vote for your preferences, and it's sort of a hodgepodge of, right, well, that candidate then sort of commands, you know, not first people's preferences or the first vote, but, you know, something in between. It's not someone who they've actively gone out to vote for, if you sort of, you know, have that kind of optional choice system. I don't think that would work for the UK. But there are some instances, if Parliament is going to change the rules significantly, like our electoral system, then maybe there should be a referendum. Malcolm, thank you so much for that. Let's go to William in Swansea.
Yes, hello. I just wanted to discuss with you the possibility of looking at what's the word I'm looking for? I'm sorry. Right now, we are in a position where we're bankrupt. We are possibly at war with Russia, and we have an invasion of illegal aliens. Now, the way our system is organised, the only person that can dissolve Parliament is the King. Is that correct?
Yes, yes.
And therefore, surely doesn't that put the island, Wales and Scotland at a disadvantage? Would it be possible
for those three to form a group and present themselves through the Privy Council to the King, and then can we look at changing the rules so that, because we're all in this together, and in reality, if you look at any company where you have four partners, should we say, but they are all equal. Right now, Scotland, Wales and Ireland are not equal, and surely if the people of Scotland, Ireland and Wales deemed that it was necessary for a dissolution of Parliament, it shouldn't be left in the hands of King Charles.
Well, the government has to recommend a decision of Parliament if it can't command a majority in the House of Commons. So that's what would happen. But you're absolutely right. Where there hasn't been the imbalance, English MPs, I should say, have more of a say over the rest of the United Kingdom. That's why there was an English Votes for English Laws bill that came through during the Cameron years, but was soon got rid of because of the imbalance. It's a Parliament for the United Kingdom, William, but an interesting call there. Let's squeeze one more in before we head off. Robert is in Hertfordshire. Hi, Rob.
Hi, good morning, Charlie. Listen, I wouldn't be surprised if Burnham calls a snap general election because he can see the right is at a low ebb. Now, we've got one chance at this. One chance, and we need to unify. There has to be a common purpose, and the common purpose is get rid of this government, get rid of this Marxist, government that's ruling this country, which is being run by the Fabians.
You're not a fan.
We need to get rid of them.
You're not a fan of Andy Burnham. Can he turn fortunes around for the Labour Party?
He can, because they're very clever. They've banded together, and this is what the right needs to do. And when you think about it, really, it's still a two-party system, the right and the left. It still boils down to a two-party system. I think Rupert Lowe is doing more harm than good, to be honest with you. So we have to sort of somehow buy him off. But we've got one go at this, because if we get it wrong, and they're in for another few years, that is the end of it. That's the end of it.
Well, that is the question we've been asking. Should the right unite to stop a further Labour government coming into power, to extending their grip in office, or any kind of left-wing coalition? Robert, thank you so much for your call, and thank you to everyone who called and texted and called in this morning. So sorry we couldn't get through them all, but it's been a marathon of 4 hours with some great guests and great topics, and there is still more to come over the next 3 hours with the wonderful Samara Gills, who joins me now. Hello.
Hello, Charlie. Great to be with you.
What have you got in store for the next few hours?
Oh, goodness. I'm going to talk about